Chapter 1241. Li Qingshan still had a faint smile on his face. Even though he was a little sad, he did not feel sad. The ape demon fishing for the moon was destined to be an illusion. Why should he be sad for the moment when the moonlight flowed into his palm? We are husband and wife. Don't you have anything to say to me? Yang Miaozhen could not help but ask. The man in front of her had once made her so infatuated that she even gave birth to a child for him. I do have a lot to say to you, but we are not husband and wife. I wanted to leave you, but I didn't expect you to be one step ahead of me. Not. Yang Miaozhen also felt a stab of pain in her heart. Li Qingshan said with certainty, "No, I once had a woman I wanted to marry, but in the end, I let her down. I thought I could take her to travel the world, but in the end, I realized that it was my wishful thinking. From that day on, I swore that I would never marry again, and I would never make any vows of eternal love to anyone. For people of my generation, the vicissitudes of life are too easy." Yang Miaozhen finally understood why he only had concubines, but never held any wedding. She originally thought that he was too jumpy and could not stand these red tape. She sighed faintly and said, "I see. So that's how it is. I've never heard you say these words before." Li Qingshan said with a smile, "I am not stupid. Why do I have to say these annoying words? Why are you not afraid of annoying me today? No matter how indifferent you appear, I know that you are a person who values relationships. I am afraid that there is still something in your heart that you can't give up, and it will affect your ascension. After all, you are a woman. There are very few women like Gu Yenying. So, do you like President Gu or me?" Li Qingshan shook his head. "Let's not talk about this. Sit down and listen to me. You've only just started after you've ascended." So the two sat opposite each other, one talking and the other listening. From the matters to pay attention to during the tribulation, to the cultivation methods after ascension, to battles between cultivators, Li Qingshan passed on all the knowledge he could possibly use to Yang Miaozhen, no matter how trivial it was. He was like a master passing down instructions to his disciple who was about to leave seclusion. Yang Miaozhen asked from time to time. It was no longer a prince and a concubine, but a senior and a junior. The two cultivators were communicating. Unknowingly, the faint sorrow of parting had been completely washed away, and it was instead filled with yearning and hope for the future. 3 days later, thunder roared. Yang Miaozhen soared into the sky to resist the tribulation lightning. A moment later, the thunder clouds dissipated. Yang Miaozhen looked back at Li Qingshan, nodded slightly, and disappeared into the horizon. From then on, they were separated from the boundless void and separated in the vast sea of stars. It was likely that they would never meet again. It wasn't that they were fickle, but that they had greater pursuits and wished each other well. It was better than remembering a mound. Li Qingshan silently said, "Miaozhen, have a safe journey." He turned around and returned to Zhongdu City, using his clone to observe the heavenly tribulation of ascension. He had gained a better understanding of the laws of heaven and earth in this world. He needed to properly comprehend it. When he left this world in the future, it should be of great help. After devouring the Frost Prefecture cauldron, this world began to undergo subtle changes. However, these changes were not immediate. Instead, they were subtle. Perhaps one day, in the future, the mountains and rivers of this world could also condense into the divine seal of mountains and rivers, or even evolve into a wider world. However, that was a matter for thousands of years later, and Li Qingshan finally did not feel bored anymore. In Zhongdu City, the palace that had been destroyed by the heavenly lightning and earthly fire was quickly rebuilt. It had a distinct Qingzhou style, especially a huge statue standing in the square with a long saber on its back, looking into the distance. It was the appearance of Li Qingshan. Passers-by who passed by had to pay their respects. Deep in the palace, Li Qingshan was lying on the bed with his head propped up. Snacks were placed all around him. There were peanuts, melon seeds, fruits, and pastries. He casually grabbed them and sent them into his mouth. There was a mysterious smile on his face, and he looked like he was daydreaming. His hand touched nothing on the plate, and immediately shouted, "Fei Hong, melon seeds!" Fei Hong helplessly served the melon seeds and conveniently cleaned up the melon seed shells and shells that were piled up on the floor. This was the confidential place where Gu Yenying worked. Ordinary maids did not have the qualifications to enter. Only she, the chief steward, was able to personally serve this chivalrous king. From that day onwards, Li Qingshan became even more lazy. In the past, he would often stroll around. Now, he was practically lying on the bed, without moving. He did not sleep for days and nights, and actually had a pair of dark circles under his eyes. He was the invincible chivalrous king, with unparalleled martial arts. Ha 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 ha! Li Qingshan suddenly burst into laughter, startling Fei Hong. However, she saw that his eyes were empty and not looking at anything. She could not help but sigh heavily. She looked at Gu Yenying, who was concentrating on handling official business, and asked, "Guild leader Gu, is His Highness really all right? You don't need to worry about him. He is currently comprehending the laws of heaven and earth." Comprehending the laws of heaven and earth. Fei Hong looked at Li Qingshan again, and saw that the smile on his face had disappeared. Instead, it had become somewhat lascivious. In this world, no matter what one did, they could not do without comprehending the laws of heaven and earth. She had never seen someone who comprehended the laws of heaven and earth like this. She could not help but shake her head and leave. Without raising her head, Gu Yenying asked, "Qingshan, take a look at the southern part of the Southern Territory. I just received news that there are a few cave masters there who do not seem to be very peaceful." "Ah, wait a moment. Oh, I see them." The group of country bumpkins from the 72 caves have gathered a large group of natives for a meeting. They say that your new laws are too harsh, and they are thinking of ways to resist it. After so many years, there were no longer any organizations that dared to go against the world society. However, all kinds of opportunistic and covert actions were still unavoidable. The laws that were issued would often become unrecognizable when they reached the lower levels. Some people would even take advantage of the situation and damage the reputation of the world society. The reason why Gu Yenying arranged for Li Qingshan to stay here was to use him as a super monitor. There was nothing in the world that could be hidden from him. He could immediately understand the most real situation and then use targeted methods to amend the laws in a timely manner. At the same time, he would maintain the dignity of the laws and make them more compatible with the path of hell. Following Li Qingshan's comprehension of the laws of heaven and earth, it was no longer as simple as observing the present. It even included the past and the future. In the blink of an eye, he could know the cause and effect of a matter. He could even pry into the most subtle changes in people's hearts. He could also multitask and monitor the happenings in various places at the same time. This was indeed the means of the gods. However, he used this ability like a TV show. From the romance of the rich and powerful to the romance of the countryside, from the world of animals to man and nature, every channel was full of fun and required him to keep track of it. In addition, there were several those programs that he watched a lot as well. The only thing that made Gu Yenying feel fortunate was that he finally stopped making a fuss about returning to the 9 prefectures. Li Qingshan seemed to have sensed something and suddenly said, "Gu Yenying, once I understand the laws of heaven and earth in this world, we will return to the 9 prefectures." Don't even think about delaying it. All right, please continue. Chapter 1242. Spring rain, summer thunder, autumn wind, winter snow, the four seasons changed. Amidst the tribulation lightning, Li Qingshan saw off his old friends one by one. He asked the infant Rahu and Xiaoming, "Where do you think they'll ascend to?" Luo Ho Xiaoming had become so small that he was even smaller than a newborn baby. Li Qingshan could carry him with one hand. His skin had also turned pink. Most of the time, his eyes were closed as if he was a sleeping baby. However, his brows were always furrowed, and his expression was sometimes twisted to the point of being ferocious. He was sweating so much that his swaddling clothes would be soaked in a second. It was as if he was in a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Li Qingshan would always wake him up at this time and ask him something. So Luo Ho Xiaoming opened his eyes. His eyes were as bright as rubies, but they were covered with a layer of mist. After a moment of confusion, he came back to his senses. His lips moved, and he answered vaguely, 6 paths of reincarnation. Just as I expected. Li Qingshan nodded. Not long ago, an Asura under his command ascended. Through the mirror image's perspective, he clearly saw a blood-colored vortex blossoming in the void and swallowing the Asura. Originally, he thought that ascending from a small world to a medium world, and then from a medium world to a great world. Now, it seemed that this 6 paths of reincarnation was the final destination of all the worlds in the void, whether it was life or death. It was understandable. Of course, ascenders couldn't cross the void to another world. Only the 6 paths of reincarnation was connected to every world, and only then would there be the possibility of ascending. However, what kind of form the 6 paths of reincarnation existed in was still something that Li Qingshan couldn't understand. But now, he gradually understood this world. Luo Ho Xiaoming fell asleep again. His expression gradually became ferocious, even filled with terror. Asura had always been known for their bravery and fearlessness. But what could make this Asura's divine son show such an expression? His nightmare became deeper and deeper, so deep that even Li Qingshan couldn't wake him up anymore. His breath also became weaker and weaker until it was almost non-existent. One day, after an extremely long slumber, so long that Li Qingshan thought he would never wake up again, he suddenly opened his eyes and bawled like an infant. He was filled with endless sorrow and bitterness. Li Qingshan was surprised. He picked up the swaddling clothes in a hurry, but he caught a whiff of blood. He opened the swaddling clothes and took a look. The tender skin cracked as droplets of blood dripped out, igniting red lotuses. His instinctive sense of danger made him let go of Luo Ho and Xiaoming, retreating far away. The red lotus flames actually gave him a feeling even more terrifying than Xiao and Samadhi flames of white bone. They seemed to possess a law that was even more profound and ancient than the laws of the world. It could not be defied, passing through all the worlds in the world. It was this law that backfired on this Asura's divine son, who once had supreme divine power. Gu Yenying, who was focused on revising the new law, was also stunned. She stared at the blooming red lotuses and felt that even the law of the Naraka realm couldn't compare to the law contained in the red lotuses. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying both held their breaths. After the red lotuses bloomed to their peak, they all began to wither. Little Luaho's crying stopped, and he spat out a red lotus. This red lotus was larger than all the other red lotuses, and its petals bloomed. It was as big as a wash basin, and there was a baby lying within it. Surprisingly, this baby also looked like little Luoho, and he had a happy smile on his face, without a hint of sorrow. Looking at the bottom of the lotus, little Luoho had already turned into ashes. The last lotus flower also slowly withered and finally dissipated. All of this happened in just a moment. The baby crawled up from the ground and looked at himself with a satisfied expression. He put his hands on his waist and proudly showed off the little elephant under him. In that moment, he washed away all of his melancholy and dejection. He pointed at Li Qingshan arrogantly. "Li Qingshan, get me something to eat. I want fresh milk and grapes." Li Qingshan and Gu Yanning looked at each other. They still didn't understand what was going on. There seemed to be some shocking change happening to Luo Ho Xiaoming, but it only looked like he had become more arrogant. Li Qingshan said tentatively, "Little Ming." Ming is Ming, but remove the word little. From today onwards, I am Luo Xiaoming. Okay, little Ming. It's Luo Ho Xiaoming. Luo Ho Xiaoming's expression darkened. "No problem, little Ming." "Bastard." Luo Ho Xiaoming glared at Li Qingshan. His eyes were full of fighting spirit, just like a real Azura. Li Qingshan slowly approached him and squatted down. He tentatively extended his right hand and curled his middle finger. "What are you trying to do? Don't you dare." Luo Ho Xiaoming's body swayed as he tried to avoid Li Qingshan's hand. "Pa!" Li Qingshan flicked Luo Ho Xiaoming's forehead. Luo Ho Xiaoming fell to the ground, his face red with anger. Li Qingshan scratched his chin and chuckled. "I thought you suddenly gained some amazing ability, but it turns out you're only SOSO." Luo Ho Xiaoming sat on the ground. "Li Qingshan, I definitely won't forgive you in the future." Li Qingshan slowly curled his middle finger. Luo Ho Xiaoming decided that a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. Li Qingshan ordered someone to bring fresh milk and grapes. Luo Ho Xiaoming immediately ignored everything else and started to eat and drink. Gu Yanning asked curiously, "Little Ming, what kind of fire is that just now?" Luo Ho Xiaoming said angrily, "Red lotus karmic fire." Then he said seriously, "We have to leave this place quickly." "Why?" Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. This was really the case of the eunuchs panicking instead of the emperor. "Have you noticed any changes in me?" Luo Ho Xiaoming clenched his fists. "You're growing up." Gu Yanning keenly noticed that Luo Ho Xiaoming had more hair on his head than when he was born from the red lotus karmic fire. His speech was also clearer, but Li Qingshan noticed even more. Originally, although Luo Ho Xiaoming was not rejected by this world, he was not accepted by it either. But ever since he was reborn from the red lotus karmic fire, the heaven and earth spiritual chi had been gathering towards him. It was simply unstoppable. That's right. If this continues, it won't be long before I face the first heavenly tribulation. I can't ascend in this world, or I'll return to the Azura realm. Luo Ho Xiaoming said. Different from Li Qingshan, who was a half-baked god of the world, he was a natural god and was born in this world. He was a child of destiny protected by this world. Even if he was isolated from the heaven and earth spiritual chi, just eating and drinking would allow him to grow rapidly. He would grow stronger with every passing second until he reached the limit of what this world could contain. Yes, your mother is looking for you everywhere. You can't just walk right into her trap. Li Qingshan agreed. He asked Gu Yanning impatiently, "Gu Yanning, are you coming or not? Aren't you going to understand the laws of heaven and earth?" "I'm almost done. I can study the rest when I return to the land of the 9 prefectures. Aren't you afraid that you'll lose your connection with your doppelgangers?" "Foolish woman, don't underestimate my talent." "All right, then let's go." "But, smart man, where is the land of the 9 prefectures?" Chapter 1243. Li Qingshan glared at Gu Yanning angrily, with his thick eyebrows raised. He clenched and then opened his hands as he stared at her slender and beautiful neck. Strong winds blew in the sky, dark clouds rolled, and thunder rumbled. His anger had changed the color of the wind and clouds. Gu Yenying knew that he was truly angry. She hurriedly explained, "When we came here, we only relied on the rock feather to make decisions. We randomly chose a small world in the void. It's not easy to return the way we came. Then why don't you let the Kuan-Peng's feather make the decision again?" Li Qingshan barked. Thunder suddenly boomed outside the room. Gu Yenying smiled bitterly. Although the rock feather is a spiritual object, it doesn't have any intelligence. Now that I've inherited part of its inheritance, it can't make decisions on its own. So, you've been fooling me all this time. No wonder you've been delaying your return. Gu Yenying. Oh, Gu Yenying, I've trusted you all this time. How dare you treat me like this? Li Qingshan took a step forward. His fangs were protruding, and his face was full of ferocity. The thunder rumbled, and the lightning flickered on his face. A few tiger stripes were faintly discernible. It was obvious that he really wanted to kill her. Gu Yenying sighed in her heart. She knew that if she didn't deal with this properly, her life might be in danger. No matter how casual he seemed to be, there was a fierce tiger in his heart. If he was really angered, he would not be soft-hearted. By then, paying with my body would no longer be a joke. She would really have to pay with her body. If she passed through the void and overcame all the hardships, it would be a great tragedy if she died in his hands in the end. Qingshan, I only found out about it not long ago. I didn't mean to deceive you. I originally wanted to wait for you to become a true god of the world. Then I might be able to completely inherit the rock's inheritance and find the way back. Hey, he can wait, but I can't. Luo Ho Xiaoming knew the origin of that feather. He knew that with Gu Yenying's cultivation base, it would take more than 8 to 10 years for her to inherit the inheritance, not to mention in such a world. Shut up, Li Qingshan shouted. Luo Ho Xiaoming shrugged. He had learned this action from Li Qingshan, indicating that it didn't matter at all. In any case, as long as he didn't return to the Azura realm, he could just go to a bigger world. As for Gu Yenying, perhaps it didn't matter if he returned to the 9 regions or not. Only Li Qingshan had to go back to find little, and Luo Ho Xiaoming continued, even if there's a path, it's still not enough. I also advise you to stop looking for your original world. You have no idea how many dangers there are in the void. Last time, it was the Kuan-Peng's feather that helped you choose the best route. Was this still the best route? You should learn to be smarter. Little Ming, you asked for this yourself. Li Qingshan reached out and grabbed Luo Ho Xiaoming. He aimed at his butt and slapped him hard. Outside the door, torrential rain poured down. Luo Ho Xiaoming cursed and struggled with all his might. As a dignified divine child, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? Gu Yenying didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She recalled what Li Qingshan had said before. Beating a child on a rainy day is nothing to do anyway. Her heart was filled with regret for both of them. If it weren't for her, Li Qingshan wouldn't have landed in this world. And Luo Ho Xiaoming had completely taken the blame for her, bearing Li Qingshan's monstrous anger. The wildflower saber and the slingshot named Littleya were quietly placed on the bed. They even talked to each other and felt deeply ashamed. These two people were too shameless. This was their first confrontation, and it ended with Li Qingshan's complete victory. However, Luo Ho Xiaoming also cursed all 8 generations of his ancestors. At this moment, he was staring at Li Qingshan with murderous eyes. Li Qingshan completely ignored him. He took a deep breath and regained his composure. His eyes were tranquil and distant. At crucial times, women really can't be relied on. Yes, children can't be relied on either. Gu Yenying pinched the bridge of her nose and was speechless. Actually, This had nothing to do with men or women, old or young. Crossing the void with the cultivation of a level 3 heavenly tribulation and traveling back and forth between two incomparably distant worlds was like asking a child to cross a desert without any preparation. All he could rely on was that Kuan Peng's feather. Moreover, he couldn't completely control this only means of transportation. We'll leave tomorrow. I'll deduce the route. Qingshan, you know it's impossible for you to deduce it. Gu Yenying frowned. No matter how much she believed in Li Qingshan's methods, she still had basic common sense. The distance between these two worlds was probably millions of miles. Moreover, it wasn't a straight line. Who knew how many twists and turns it contained information that was even more complicated than the laws of this world. Once we leave this world, my power will recover, and I can start to deduce. Although I can't deduce the entire route at once, I can use the changes in the celestial bodies to reduce the difficulty of the deduction. Li Qingshan's expression was calm. He spoke as if it was an extremely ordinary matter, as if he was just walking while searching for the route. This is practically suicide. Gu Yenying couldn't help but comment like this. With such a great distance between them, as long as there was a slight deviation in the deduction, they would never be able to reach their destination. Moreover, deduction consumed a large amount of spiritual power. The void couldn't supply it at all. This is what you promised me. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. Then he retracted his expression and said, if you don't want to leave, I can't force you. Let's just say that our fate has come to an end. From now on, you walk your own path, and I'll walk mine. Let's part ways here. Gu Yenying felt as if her heart was stabbed, but without the Kuan Peng's feather, how are you going to? Li Qingshan said with determination. I will return to the 9 continents through the 6 paths of reincarnation. Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't help but mock him. Ha! What a joke! This plan is even more stupid than the one just now. Do you know how big the 6 paths of reincarnation is? Do you think that just because the 6 paths of reincarnation is connected to the other worlds, you can use it as a bridge? No matter how dangerous it is, I must return to the 9 continents. Little N is waiting for me there. I've made her wait for too long. Li Qingshan strode out of the door. The thunderstorm came and went quickly. In the blink of an eye, the clouds had dispersed, and the vast Star River became even more dazzling. At this very moment, she was waiting for his return somewhere on the other side of the Star River. He had never doubted this. Thus, this endless river of stars gained meaning and merged into his chest. Suddenly, Gu Yenying's voice sounded behind him. Then let's go. Li Qingshan turned around and saw a smile on her lips. She was as graceful as the wind, so he smiled back. Have you gone mad? Luo Ho Xiaoming was shocked. If he wanted to leave this world, his biggest reliance was Gu Yenying. If she left this world, he would have to follow her. Li Qingshan asked, Are you afraid? Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes moved back and forth between Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying. They seemed to be glowing with a light that even he, a former god, had to face. You two damn bastards. Chapter 1244. In the deep winter in the north. The night sky was clear as if it had been washed, and the moonlight was as bright as frost. It shone on the vast forest, and the snow was surging. A lone peak stood on the snowy plains of the forest. The words World Sword Sect were deeply engraved on the precipice, overlooking the world in the south. There was a commotion in the forest, and a young man jumped out of the forest. He looked up at the 4 big words and smiled scornfully. His face was handsome, and his short black hair was mixed with golden luster. His eyes were round, and he seemed to be quick-witted. Then he landed lightly on the snow without leaving a trace. His eyes fell on the back of a tall man at the bottom of the precipice, and he showed a complicated expression. There was kindness and respect from the bottom of his heart, but there was also resentment and dissatisfaction. But there was one thing that was beyond doubt. In his heart, this man was far more lofty than the lone peak, and even somewhat unattainable. So he walked forward and bowed. "Father!" Li Qingshan looked back and smiled. "My son, you are indeed the first to come." This young man was his youngest monkey child. "How could I not come early when father summoned me? But if it was in the past, you would definitely jump on my back." There was a hint of nostalgia in Li Qingshan's eyes. Humans were not plants, and how could they be emotionless? "Father, are you really going to leave?" The young man was suddenly filled with reluctance. The person in front of him was not only the world-famous hero king, but also his father. Li Qingshan waved his hand. "I'm afraid your brothers and sisters will only arrive after a while. Go and catch some game. I want a drink." The young man responded, turned around, and went into the forest. After a while, he came back carrying a big brown bear. There were 3 more people next to Li Qingshan, and they all smiled and greeted him. One of them said, "The youngest, you are so attentive." The young man snorted and went to deal with the bear meat. Li Qingshan then ordered the 3 people to find some firewood. When the bonfire was lit and the bear meat was still emitting a fragrance, there were already people at the bottom of the precipice. There were men and women. They were all outstanding people, standing or sitting. They kept their distance from each other. They were all princes and princesses who had inherited the most outstanding bloodline in this world. They possessed miraculous powers that ordinary people did not have, even if their cultivation was higher than theirs. It was also very difficult to defeat them, not to mention that there were many of them. He had already reached the pinnacle of cultivation and would definitely become the ruler of this world. The only reason he wasn't yet was because he was a paragon. Their father was still sitting there, and everyone knew that he wouldn't stay here for long. Half a year ago, the leader of the world society, Gu Yenying, handed over the reins of power and ended the rule that had lasted for decades. Then, she announced that she was going to leave this world. The world was in turmoil because of this. Fortunately, the laws that she had spent decades establishing ensured basic stability. Moreover, the Hero King was still around, so who dared to cause trouble? However, the work that was once done by her now required the cooperation of dozens of people. Most importantly, there was a lack of a decision-maker. The world needed a new king. Those who were qualified were among them. It was not just because of their status. After all, this was a world where the strong ruled. If one did not have enough power, no matter how virtuous he was, he would not be able to sit firmly on the throne. Therefore, they were the only ones who could compete for this position. As a result, not to mention half-sisters, even brothers of the same father and mother were wary of each other. They also believed that the reason why Li Qingshan had gathered all the disciples tonight was to choose one of them to inherit the Hero King's position. They were even more displeased with the others. Li Qingshan seemed to be unaware of all this. He smiled and ordered, "Hu Chun, cut the meat. Feng Xian, come and pour some wine for your father." A bare-chested man with a curly beard came forward. He pulled out a long knife from his waist and cut out the bloody heart of the bear, offering it to Li Qingshan. Then he cut off a bear's paw and began to chew on it, as if there was no one else around. Other than Li Qingshan, no one was qualified to have his service. The others showed dissatisfaction, but they knew that his temperament had always been like this. Although his cultivation was not the best among his siblings, no one had the confidence to defeat him in a one-on-one fight. A girl wearing a pure gold phoenix crown and a gorgeous dress walked over with her mouth pouted. Obviously, she was not willing to do this kind of thing. Anyway, she did not want to be the hero king, so she was not willing to suck up to the old man. Li Huchun and Li Fengxian inherited the bloodline of the tiger devil and the phoenix, respectively. They were unique among all the disciples. They were also the most arrogant, so Li Qingshan loved to order them around. He said that he wanted to get rid of their arrogance, but no one believed this explanation. From the bottom of their hearts, they thought that the old man was just bullying them. Their youngest son had already grown into a teenager and had a rebellious heart. Many of them, using the lifespan of mortals, had already entered middle age. They were no longer the innocent children they used to be. Even if it was Li Qingshan's orders, they would not obey him from the bottom of their hearts. Of course, this was exactly what Li Qingshan wanted. Loyal ministers and filial sons were the most boring of all. He shook his head with a smile and bit off a third of the bear's heart. He chewed carelessly a few times before swallowing it all in one gulp. He drank all the alcohol in the goblet. Gui Nian, divide the meat. Yes, father. The young man who had once helped Yang Miaozhen pass on the news walked over. After a moment of thought, he divided the bear meat piece by piece with his fingers like a knife. None of them were dissatisfied. Clearly, this was not just because he had thought it through thoroughly enough. There was no dispute over the division. Li Guanyin was the only one who had inherited the spirit turtle's bloodline, as well as the only one who had no interest in the power of the world. Instead, he was very similar to his mother, Yang Miaozhen. He was completely focused on the path, and he possessed the spirit turtle's forbearance and cunning. As a result, he was the only one who did not have any enemies, even though he was not very old among the disciples. Li Qingshan glanced at the disciples. Apart from the three of them, most of them were monkey cubs. This was obviously because the demonic ape bloodline had the absolute advantage, and their personalities were free and unrestrained. The remaining few were calves. Their personalities were much calmer, but they were all very stubborn. One of them was bareheaded. He was the only one who did not receive the bear meat because he wanted to become a monk, who knew how many times he had been beaten by Li Qingshan, but in the end, he still became a monk. He was very strict with his precepts. Currently, he was chanting scriptures with his palms together, helping the poor bear to ascend to the afterlife. Li Qingshan suspected that he was fated with Buddhism, but he failed to convert to Buddhism in the end, which was why he gave birth to such a freak. He picked up a ball of snow and rubbed his hands. He stood up and gazed at the peak of the mountain. Children, eat and drink your fill. Warm up. Prepare to climb the mountain with me. Be careful not to fall. Do what you can. If you can't go up, then stay here. If you fall to your death, don't blame me for not warning you. The disciples thought he was joking again. It was just a mountain. How could they fall? Even the youngest one had the lowest cultivation. His cultivation was also the lowest, so he didn't find this difficult. He had grown up climbing mountains and climbing trees. Li Guanyin suddenly looked to the north. He lowered his head and said, "Royal father, I want to stay here." "Son of a turtle, you have always been the smartest." Li Qingshan still treated him like a child. He patted his head. "But not everything can be divined. If you blindly seek good fortune and avoid disaster, you will miss out on a lot of wonderful things." Li Guanyin was deep in thought. He suddenly looked up at him, as if he had understood something. "Then I will go too." Simply climbing the mountain was not a problem for him. But as he spoke, a dark cloud swept over from the north. It covered the stars and the moon, and snowflakes drifted down. "Let's go." Li Qingshan climbed up the precipice. The disciples followed closely behind. Only Li Fengxian spread her wings and fluttered around. She was proud of being able to fly. But when the light snow turned into heavy snow, then into a blizzard, and the wind howled between heaven and earth, she could not fly like this anymore. After all, she was not a real phoenix. With her current cultivation, the human body was still too heavy. She could only climb the rock wall in a sorry state. She shouted at Li Qingshan, "You must have divined it correctly." Li Qingshan laughed loudly. He opened his arms to the sky. Let the blizzard come more fiercely. As if the heavens heard his voice, the wind became more and more violent. The sea of trees rose and fell violently. Snow was no longer falling. Instead, it rolled between heaven and earth. Even the thick layer of snow was swept up. With a crack, a towering tree that towered above the sea of trees was actually snapped in half. It was swept up by the wind and landed dozens of miles away. Facing the might of heaven and earth, even the princes and princesses were as insignificant as mortals. Not only did it make climbing extremely difficult, the plummeting temperature made it even worse. Originally, no one cared about the cold. With their physiques, they were almost impervious to heat and cold. None of them wore winter clothes. Just now, their breaths turned into ice. They knew how powerful it was. They could only use a breath of true energy to resist the cold, but it was quickly consuming their true energy. Li Qingshan purposefully chose the most dangerous path. He even purposefully took a winding path. Everyone believed that this was a test. Even if it was not for the power of the world, for the dignity of the princes and princesses, no one gave up. The team gradually stretched into a long, winding line. The lips of the youngster at the end of the line were blue from the cold. His hands did not listen to him. The figures of his elder brother and sister were blurred in the wind and snow. He could not see his father walking at the front. He looked down. Other than the wind and snow, he could not see anything. He did not know how high he had climbed. If he fell, he would definitely be smashed to pieces. He could only grit his teeth and continue to climb. In an instant, all the figures in front of him disappeared. Other than the howling of the wind and snow, he could not hear anything else. It was as if he was the only one left in the world. The blood in his body seemed to be about to freeze. Suddenly, a rock that he was holding loosened and fell. This was a common thing when climbing. However, his stiff body did not allow him to change his movement. He lost his center of gravity and fell straight down. Ah! The youngest, Li Fengxian, suddenly looked back. She opened her wings and jumped up. She grabbed the youngster and tried to return to the rock wall. However, in the snowstorm, she could not even fly alone, let alone carry another person. Like a kite with a broken string, she was whirling in the wind. Both of them were about to fall. Another figure jumped out of the rock wall and shouted, "Monkey fishing for the moon." This was not the name of a powerful move. It was the name of the game that all monkey children played when they were young. The story of the monkey fishing for the moon was told by Li Qingshan to each of them. 7 or 8 figures jumped into the wind and snow. The first person felt his legs tighten when he grabbed Li Fengxian. Finally, a long human ladder was formed, swaying in the wind and snow. Li Huchen roared and pulled out his sword to cut the wind. The bald prince and several other brothers tried their best to pull everyone back. They kept chanting Buddha's name, Amitabha, Amitabha. When the young man came back to his senses, he felt a few strong arms pressing him tightly against the rock wall. A wave of genuine qi entered his body, and many concerned faces appeared in front of him. For a moment, he couldn't tell whose arms they were. A warm feeling welled up in his chest, and tears rolled down his cheeks, which immediately froze into ice. Just now, when he jumped out of the cliff, if anyone hesitated for a moment, he would have fallen down. "Idiot, why are you crying? You don't know to call us when you can't hold on anymore? Li Fengxian said. Li Yuanfei, just now, you are in front of the youngest. You don't know to take care of him. Madam, I can't hold on anymore. How can I take care of him? Speaking of which, if I didn't react fast enough, you would be dead. Li Yuanfei looked wronged. Just now, he jumped out and shouted monkey fishing for the moon, in the air, gathering all his brothers. Ha 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 ha! Clear laughter rang out from above. Everyone raised their heads and saw Li Qingshan standing on the rock face with his arms crossed. It was like nothing had happened the entire time. He even said complacently, "How's that? It's all thanks to me teaching you this move." Everyone stared at him angrily. Li Qingshan beckoned to them. "Come on, whoever reaches the top first, I will give him the title of Hero King." They looked at each other. In this snowstorm, each other's faces became clear, and a long-lost friendship surged in their hearts. Li Guanyin said, "Let me bring up the rear." Li Fengxian said, "I will go with you. What Hero King? I don't care." As a result, they formed a new group. The strongest took turns to lead the way, digging holes in the cold, tough walls that they could climb through. They no longer pursued Li Qingshan at full speed. Instead, they climbed straight towards the top of the mountain. Li Qingshan smiled and shook his head. With a leap, he shot to the top of the mountain and disappeared into the snowstorm. As he disappeared, the snowstorm began to lessen. All the princes and princesses were certain that the violent and abnormal snowstorm just now was definitely his doing. Although they did not know how he controlled this vast power of heaven and earth, they were certain that it was so, and because of this, they had a bellyful of anger. Perhaps in the hearts of all children, their fathers were omnipotent, but most children would find that this was not the case when they grew up. But Li Qingshan still retained this feeling. No matter how easygoing he was still like a mysterious mountain that stood far away in the sky. One could only look at him from afar, but not approach him. Chapter 1245. I still need to focus on my cultivation. I don't have time to deal with all these things. The old man is obviously fooling us again. We can't let him succeed. They all stepped back and refused to go up. Among the chatter, someone said, "Just let the youngest do it." Everyone agreed. Let the old man be proud. We'll let the weakest and most useless one be the Hero King. Li Yuanfei, you're the weakest and most useless one. Let go of me. I don't want to be the Hero King. Thus, the young man was passed up hand by hand, and he was the only one who objected loudly. But his body was stiff. He couldn't resist. He was sent to the edge of the cliff. He was so anxious that his face turned red. At this time, a big hand reached in front of him. He looked up and saw Li Qingshan's smiling face. "Okay, I promise you. If you don't want to be the Hero King, then so be it." Li Qingshan glanced down again. "Haha, old man, a bunch of fools." But according to human standards, he was indeed more than 100 years old. Everyone cursed in their hearts. We've been fooled by the old man again. When they climbed up the cliff, even Li Fengxian couldn't care about his image anymore. He lay on the ground and panted. Li Qingshan stood on the side of the cliff with his hands behind his back. He looked through the broken gate tower. The ape deity villa had been eroded by wind and snow for decades. Even the broken walls were hard to recognize. This was the place where he started in this world. Now it would be the end. "My children, I'm leaving." The princes and princesses were shocked. They knew this day would come eventually, but when it really came, they still felt it was too sudden. Maybe they had an illusion that this man would always be like a mountain standing in the distance until the end of time. They couldn't help but feel all kinds of feelings in their hearts. Li Guanyin sighed and stood up. He cupped his hands and said, "Father, You still have many things to settle. This world. What does this world have to do with me? Li Qingshan blinked. For a moment, he looked even younger than the children. Maybe some prisoners would fall in love with the cage, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't be locked up for 100 years or 1,000 years. Amitba, you are the hero king. Everyone felt that he had a responsibility to the world. Even though he had not done anything serious over the years, the title of knight-errant king was enough to subdue all the evildoers. It was even more effective than Gu Yeniying's strict laws. I am the hero king, or your king father. I have many other identities and titles, but I'm actually Li Qingshan. Now, Li Qingshan is going to do what Li Qingshan wants to do. Li Qingshan clapped his hands. What lord of the world? What great power of the world? They were all discarded like a pair of worn-out shoes. Lightly and quickly, he walked towards the gate of the villa. Gu Yenying was waiting for him there. Amitba, father, please stay a little longer. Your sudden departure will cause chaos in the world. You put Amitba first, then why are you begging me? The world is not the world of the hero king, nor is it the world of the world society, but the world of the people. If the people of the world think that the world should be in chaos, then let it be. In fact, Li Qingshan didn't think much of Gu Yeniying's strict laws. Although it made the world peaceful, it was normal to not pick up lost items on the road and not to close doors at night. And it even almost achieved equality for everyone. Was it really reasonable for a prince to break the law and the common people to be punished the same? The strong could not bully the weak, the wise could not play with the fools, and the group gave in to the individual. Although everyone liked and hated good and evil could not explain everything, and there was never an absolute standard. A world of peace and prosperity like this was merely a great dream that they had created using methods that surpassed this world. It was a dream that belonged to Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying. Now, they were finally going to wake up from this dream. He never thought about keeping the world society for thousands of years. There was nothing in the world that could not be destroyed. He also never thought about letting his children and grandchildren love each other and coexist peacefully. They loved each other like poisonous insects, so they could kill each other and walk their own path. And he had given everyone a chance. All kinds of martial arts manuals, cultivation methods, and unique skills were widely spread in this world, almost to the extent that they could be found everywhere, and no one could block them anymore. My children, change what you want the world to become with your own hands. If you want to do good, do good. If you want to do evil. I will look at you from the sky and laugh at your stupidity. Li Qingshan laughed and stepped into the gate of the villa, disappearing into the ruins. The children looked at each other and didn't know what to say for a moment. Suddenly, a dark blue cloud crossed the sky and fell beyond the horizon, from the Northern Territory to the Middle Territory, and even to the Southern Territory, covering the sky with a wonderful and even texture. The children looked up in surprise. Everyone in the world could see it if they looked up. An indescribable long cry resounded through the world. The dark blue cloud suddenly fell, giving people the feeling that the sky had collapsed, and those who were timid were already lying on the ground. A great wind rose. It wasn't as cold and fierce as a snowstorm, but rather hot. It was like the summer wind in June, melting all the ice and snow in the sky, whistling and surging between heaven and earth. The vast sea of trees revealed a verdant color, bending down like grass. Monstrous waves were stirred up in the eastern sea. The children also found it hard to breathe. The dark blue cloud was about to press down on their heads, but it suddenly rose up. In the blink of an eye, it shrank 100 times. Just now, they could see clearly that it was a giant bird. They couldn't help but widen their eyes, feeling extremely shocked. Their hearts felt like they had been broken through, and they could feel the boundless vastness of the world. Unknowingly, tears streamed down their cheeks. But there was no sadness or joy in their hearts. Every feeling became incomparably insignificant, and they didn't know why they were crying. A great wind rose, and the rock soared. In the blink of an eye, the rock flew far away. The stars shone brightly, and the jade sky was clear. The children stood on the cliff for a long time. Just now, they came back to their senses and felt a little dispirited. Things that they had thought to be incomparably important suddenly didn't seem worth mentioning. "Father has left," Liguanian said. "Has he really left?" The youth asked in a daze. "Didn't he say that he would watch over us from all over the world?" Li Yuanfei patted his shoulder, casually. "The youngest, you're really too young. How could you believe such words? It's more likely that he will forever live in our hearts." As soon as they finished speaking, the wind and clouds in the sky suddenly changed. Wisps of clouds appeared, forming a large smiling face under the moonlight. It looked like a child's scribble, but it vaguely resembled Li Qingshan's appearance. Li Yuanfei stammered. It can't be a coincidence, right?" "How annoying." Li Fengxian lowered his head, but he couldn't help but smile. The youth suddenly looked up and shouted, "Father, just watch carefully. We definitely won't let you down." Chapter 1246. An endless starry sky came toward them, and the stars drew billions of lines. Suddenly, the rock folded its wings and stopped steadily in the void. Li Qingshan lay on the back of the rock and couldn't help but look back. The small world had been left far behind, turning into a shining star that was tens of thousands of miles away. He looked into the depths of the void. It was dark and deep, and the stars were shining brightly. He immediately understood that every star in the void was a world, and every world had countless stories happening. Qingshan, can you still sense your doppelganger? Gu Yenying's voice sounded in Li Qingshan's mind, and it seemed to have become much larger. Although she had decided to fulfill her promise to send him back to the land of the 9 prefectures and accompany him in this gamble, she didn't want to risk everything. The key to whether Li Qingshan could deduce the way home was whether he could maintain a connection with his doppelganger and obtain the support of spiritual power. Otherwise, the spiritual power would constantly dissipate in the void, and the deduction itself would consume a lot of spiritual power. I'll say this one last time. It's not too late to turn back now. Luo Ho Xiaoming's voice sounded. He was not far from Li Qingshan. He had already grown to the age of 2 or 3 years old, and his body was full of fat. He had become a little chubby boy, and even though he had a serious expression, he couldn't be serious. Of course I can sense it, and it's very strong. Li Qingshan heard the conversation of the children on the cliff and even controlled the clouds to draw a self-portrait. The mirror doppelganger didn't let him down. In this way, he had the support of an entire world on his way home. Strangely, time flowed much faster in the small world than in the void. Everything seemed to be in fast-forward mode. In the blink of an eye, the clouds gathered and dispersed, the sun moved, and the moon rotated. The children were scattered all over the world, doing their own things. Originally, he wanted to find some time to let his doppelganger descend and give everyone a scare like a king. Now, it seemed that by the time he had time to do this, the 2 words chivalrous king would have become a distant legend. But this was also good. Let them go their own way, and I will also go my own way. That's good. Let's start the deduction. Gu Yenying gently flapped her wings again. He felt an unprecedented power surging within him, although that wasn't her own power, and it would take years for her to recover. Once it was used up, it was believed that one day she would transform into a real Kuan Peng. At this very moment, the Kuan Peng feather resonated with her heart. It had reached an unprecedented level. Since he was a bird, he had to fly. The Kuan Peng had the form of a big fish, but just like how butterflies were transformed from caterpillars, every moment they swam in the deep sea and crawled on the ground was for the day they could spread their wings and soar. Only then can I be considered to have returned my true colors. Blindly hiding and enduring silently was not the true heart of the Kuan Peng. To her, this journey was not only for a promise, but also for a greater experience. Li Qingshan nodded and tried to stretch his limbs. Without the restraint of the miniature world, the ox demon, tiger demon, spirit turtle, and phoenix all awakened, opening their eyes again. In that moment, all of his strength recovered, dyeing his dark golden eyes. They were no longer crimson either. Instead, they had become pitch black. He almost could not help but cry out, "I, Li Qingshan, have returned." However, as he powered the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression, his mind calmed down again. Like the deep sea, he silently sensed his current state first. The ape demon transformation was only at the first layer, so it did not affect the balance of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine too much. However, it was no longer as smooth and free as before. However, this was a brand new power after all. Blindly pursuing balance was pointless. Only by constantly surging with new power could he reach unprecedented heights. At this moment, he suddenly felt a sense of worry. As with the complete recovery of the spirit turtle transformation, his connection with his mirror clone had become even stronger. He could control it even more freely now. This was not a problem in itself. It was just like how, after training, a person would definitely feel like they could control their body more freely and nimbly. However, if there was stronger, would there also be weaker? If he really pulled the distance to 1,000,000 kilometers, 10 million kilometers, or even 10 million kilometers, would he really be able to maintain contact? He would not change his decision to return home because of this, but he did not hide this fact either. He passed it on to Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming. Gu Yenying said, "Little Ming, what do you think? If your clone originates from the spirit turtle clan in ruins, then it really is extremely powerful. I've heard that some spirit turtles can allow their clones to wander through the 6 realms of Sasra. However, you have to understand that while the 6 realms of Sasra are not small, they can't compare to the entire space. All powers have their limits. There's no such thing as omnipotence. I can't be certain how much distance will affect your ability either. For now, all you can do is continue advancing and verify it with practice. It's best if you can deduce the approximate distance from the world of the 9 prefectures during this process, and then make a decision." Although Luo Ho Xiaoming did not agree with this voyage, just now, since he said it was the last time, then it really was the last time. Since Li Qingshan did not change his mind, he would not say any more nonsense. Instead, he would give his full support and use his experience to provide the best advice. As a former god, he was the one who understood this space the best among the 3. Although he was still very weak, in this situation, knowledge was more important than power. Just like how Li Qingshan would not eliminate Luo Ho Xiaoming just because he wanted to take revenge on him, they all had their own temperament and courage, which was why they were able to help each other in the same boat. Yes, I will do my best and try to deduce the pattern. When the Kuan Peng flew over, it did not move in a straight line at a uniform speed. Instead, it was full of twists and turns. With the speed of the Kuan Peng, the difference between speed and slowness could be unimaginable. Whether or not he could deduce the pattern, he was not sure. But even if I lose contact with my doppelganger, I will not turn back. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "It will be too late to turn back then. We have to find another world to settle down, accumulate strength, and wait for the next opportunity before we lose contact with our doppelganger. You have all crossed worlds, so you should know the risks. Gu Yenying, do you have this ability? If the distance is not too far, I am confident that I can take you there, but I can't screen the world." The first time they flew to a small world, it was because the Kuan Peng feather was influenced by her will and chose the safest world. Even so, it still had to go through many difficulties to settle down. If it was not for Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation, it would have probably died in the small world. But now, the divine talisman of great creation was left in the small world, and it could no longer be used as a life-saving straw. The choice of the world became even more important. If they were not careful, their lives would be in danger. That's good. I will screen the world. I am very good at this. Luo Ho Xiaoming laughed at himself and touched the slingshot at his waist. All right, then I will have to trouble the 2 of you to support me, Li Qingshan said sincerely. With such companions, there was no need to worry about not being able to achieve great things. Don't talk nonsense. Leaving the small world is something I must do anyway. In this void, my position has been locked down with great difficulty. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought to himself, I am really lucky to have met these 2 fellows. Little Ming, then I will make another promise with you. If you can help me return to the 9 provinces, I will definitely help you beat up your mother. Li Qingshan's words were like a mountain. He did not care that there was another powerful god among his opponents. Anyway, he already had a 500-year promise with Qiongqi. There was no need to worry when there were too many debts, and no need to bite when there were too many gods. Luo Ho Xiaoming was stunned. He frowned and said, "Why do these words sound so strange?" "Haha, as long as the meaning is right. A mother who only wants to kill her own son. She is worse than a beast. I might as well kill her to my heart's content." Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming had been together for dozens of years. He believed that he had some understanding of Luo Ho Xiaoming's temperament. Although he did not know how Luo Ho Xiaoming had created such great evil karma to the point of summoning the rebound of karmic fire, he was definitely not an evil person. In other aspects, there was nothing to say. He was definitely a friend worth befriending. Luo Ho Xiaoming looked deeply at Li Qingshan. Friend. That was something that he had never had before. In the past, who had the qualifications to be his friend? Li Qingshan did not say anything else. He closed his eyes and concentrated on deducing the path. In order to deal with the risk of losing contact with his doppelgangers, he had to deduce the longest path here. When he first arrived, the spinning sea of stars once again reflected in his mind. Then it gradually slowed down and corresponded with the stars in the sky. Although it was only a miniature world, the spiritual energy it possessed was definitely as vast as the ocean. It did not seem like he had to worry about it running out. However, in space, the spiritual energy dispersed far too quickly. Before long, it had to stop and wait for the spiritual energy to slowly recover. He could not help but feel rather envious of Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming. Gu Yenying had transformed into a Kuanping, so she did not rely on her own power at all. Meanwhile, although Luo Ho Xiaoming had not even undergone a single heavenly tribulation, his power did not disperse. Instead, it could absorb power from space. He was currently focused on cultivating. Can I lock up my spiritual energy? However, even the spirit turtle can't do it, let alone the ox demon and tiger demon. But hold on. Li Qingshan thought of something. He pressed his hand against the top of his head and murmured, "Ape Demon's Air Assimilation." This was the name of his #1 ability of the ape demon. Originally, the ape demon transformation was too weak, so it was greatly suppressed by the other 4 transformations. One could imagine a scene like this: oxen on the left, scarlet tiger on the right, spirit turtle on the bottom, and a phoenix on the top. Meanwhile, a pitiful ape was squeezed in the middle, scratching its ears and cheeks anxiously. Now that it had finally broken free, it extended its long arms and locked down the space. In a split second, Li Qingshan felt that he had been isolated from the vast space. As expected, his spiritual energy was no longer dispersed. Although he could not move at all in this situation, and maintaining the ability also required a certain amount of spiritual energy, it was still much better than his current situation just now. After all, he did not need to move his body to perform the derivation. He only needed to think, so the efficiency was much higher. Luo Ho Xiaoming could not help but open his eyes and glance at him. He really did have various powerful bloodlines. It was strange that he could actually fuse them into one body. If he really was that legendary ape that could lock down the space with this ability, it would not be difficult for him to roam the space when he fully matured. Chapter 1247. An azure trail was reflected in the Kuan Peng's deep and sharp eyes. It spread its wings that spanned thousands of miles and flapped them with all its might. There was no wind in the void, but the edges of its wings created ripples that distorted the dark void. In an instant, it became an existence like a gale. It followed the azure trail and disappeared into the endless void. The river of stars spun and flew. In this endless void, even the Kuan Peng was as insignificant as a ring. However, it was free and unfettered, like a fish returning to the ocean. If it was trapped in a small world, it would feel cramped even when it spread its wings. Even in the world of the 9 provinces, it would not be able to travel to its heart's content. Gu Yenying was completely immersed in the joy of flying. Yes, this was what she had been searching for all this time. Endless freedom. Only the azure trail was a kind of restraint. It often made her feel the urge to leave the track. She needed to exert all her mental strength to suppress this feeling. The trail continued to extend, but the process was very slow. It was far from being able to keep up with the Kunpeng's speed. Li Qingshan stood on the Kunpeng's back. He opened his eyes wide and focused his mind. Through the flowing river of stars, he continuously verified his deductions and made further progress. However, he could not use the ape demon absorption to prevent spiritual energy from dispersing. Thus, the efficiency of his deductions was naturally not high. Fortunately, up until now, there had been no problems with the path he had deduced. It corresponded to all the stars, which made him heave a sigh of relief. In the end, after some calculations, he decided to stop deducing. He only verified his deductions so that he could better accumulate spiritual energy and prepare for the next deduction. On the other hand, Luoho and Xiaoming were completely immersed in cultivation, spending every minute and every second. Every minute and every second seemed to be growing. Li Qingshan was a little envious of their freedom. He preferred the feeling of having one's feet on the ground. Perhaps it was because he was too used to the nourishment of the power of the earth. Once he left the earth, he would feel empty. Stop! Luoho Xiaoming's voice suddenly sounded in Li Qingshan's mind. The Kunpeng retracted its wings and stopped in the void. What is it? Li Qingshan asked. I want to go through the tribulation. As soon as Luoho Xiaoming finished speaking, a clap of thunder rang out in the void. A bolt of lightning tore through the darkness and shone into Li Qingshan's eyes. He sighed in his heart. This heavenly tribulation is really everywhere. What was supposed to be a terrifying calamity now seemed very familiar. However, he felt that it was a little strange. Luoho Xiaoming must have gone through many heavenly tribulations in the past. How could he do it again? Even if a phoenix was reborn from nirvana, the heavenly tribulation it had transcended from the egg would not come again. Luoho Xiaoming leaped up and faced the heavenly tribulation. Not long after, he returned to the rock's back. His body became thinner. Furthermore, he had grown a lot taller. He looked 5 or 6 years old again. The process of transcending the tribulation was nothing to write home about. It was as easy as eating and drinking. The tribulation lightning was in his hands. Just like a tamed puppy, it could only bite him gently a few times and leave some teeth marks. Let's go. Li Qingshan asked the question in his heart. Luoho Xiaoming smiled and said, If I couldn't even deceive the heavenly tribulation, I would have been burned to death by the karmic fire. Asuras were originally immortal and could be reborn continuously, let alone the divine son of Asura. As for the karmic fire, not to mention nirvana rebirth, even reincarnation would not be able to escape. Qingshan, you are going to undergo the tribulation soon, right? Gu Yenying suddenly asked. Yes. Li Qingshan nodded with a serious look on his face. Every cultivator dreamed of going through the tribulation. Every time he underwent the tribulation, he would be reborn from the cocoon. Not only would his power increase, but his nature would also change. He could go from a mortal to a deity. However, he definitely could not undergo the fourth tribulation now, because it was beyond the limit of what the 9 prefectures could accommodate. The 9 prefectures was not a small world. It would not be as gentle as confining power and misfortune. He had seen with his own eyes the scene when Qiong Qi's incarnation descended. It was truly like being struck by lightning. Strong winds and earth fire came together, and it would not stop until the invader was destroyed. After balancing the 4 transformations of the ox, tiger, turtle, and phoenix, he was only 1 step away from the 4th tribulation. Now, he had activated the ape demon transformation. Fortunately, the ape demon transformation was only at the 1st level, so its power was very limited. It also broke the original balance and did not immediately attract the tribulation. However, with the degree of compatibility between him and the ape demon transformation. Once he broke through the boundary of the small world, the following cultivation would not be too difficult. He had gained a lot from the training in the small world. First, he comprehended the power of the earth from the confinement of the world. Only the ox demon had this ability, so it naturally laid the foundation for breaking through the 6th level of the ox demon. He could even try to break through. Among all the transformations, the ox demon transformation was not only the foundation, but also the most suitable for his temperament. Even the ape demon transformation was inferior. After several decades of fighting against the heavens, the tiger demon's fighting spirit had awakened a long time ago, constantly being tempered and tested. However, the tiger demon transformation had always focused on explosive power. If he wanted to break through to the 6th layer of the tiger demon, he still needed a great battle as a fortuitous encounter. After becoming a god of the world, observing everything in the world and comprehending the laws of the world would benefit the spirit turtle transformation no less than the ox demon transformation. In fact, it would even last longer. Both transformations just happened to focus on accumulation. Breaking through to the 6th layer of the spirit turtle transformation was only a matter of time. Currently, devoting all his efforts to deriving the path of cultivation was also a form of cultivation. Even with the shortcoming of the phoenix transformation, he experienced a rebirth of lust after going through the process of entering the world and emerging from it. It could be said that all of the transformations were restless, wanting to push Li Qingshan to a higher realm of cultivation. If he could find a world comparable to or larger than the 9 provinces, he could immediately undergo the 4th heavenly tribulation and become a demon emperor. Don't worry, I'll suppress my strength. If it really doesn't work, I'll just undergo nirvanic rebirth again. As soon as he returned to the 9 provinces, he would undergo the tribulation immediately and ascend with little and. Even if he did not want to return to the 9 provinces, space was definitely not a good place for undergoing the tribulation. Just the issue of spiritual energy dissipating would greatly affect the success rate of undergoing the tribulation. He was confident, but he was not arrogant enough to believe that undergoing the 4th heavenly tribulation would be as easy as Luo Ho Xiaoming undergoing the 1st heavenly tribulation. The Kuan Peng spread its wings and took off once more. Afterwards, it paused 2 more times so that Li Qingshan could calm down and deduce his next path. Although his connection with his mirror clone had indeed weakened, he could still control it with ease. It was as if he did not have to worry about losing contact at all. Everything went unexpectedly smoothly. Li Qingshan had already begun planning what he would do after reuniting with little Anne. He had to help the Banyan Tree King become a god of the world first, and then he would go to the Dragon Province and kill the crown prince of Xiqing. Xiongji should be fine. And who knew how Ruexine was doing? Just as he was thinking, he suddenly sensed the power of the earth that he had not felt in a very long time. However, as far as the eye could see, the closest planet was over 1,000,000 kilometers away. Apart from worlds, was there land in the endless space as well? The Kuan Peng suddenly slowed down. The mountains blocked its path. Chapter 1248. Millions of mountains stretched across the void. They were of different shapes and sizes. The big ones spanned tens of thousands of miles and were comparable to small worlds. The small ones were only the size of a fist. There were so many that one couldn't even see the end of them. They all floated quietly, silently watching the tiny Li Qingshan on the back of the rock. Li Qingshan frowned. This wasn't the case when he came. Otherwise, with the huge body of the rock, he would have to go around. But the path he deduced was to go straight through. Are you sure there's no mistake in your deductions? Gu Yening asked. Yes. Li Qingshan said. These millions of mountains seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Look carefully. Is there a star missing? Luo Ho Xiaoming said. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and opened them again. There is one missing. Could this be? It's just a destroyed world. Luo Ho Xiaoming said softly. He looked at his hand, and his face darkened. What destroyed the world? Li Qingshan felt a chill in his heart. He looked at the millions of mountains cautiously. It was as if there was a terrifying monster hiding behind one of the mountains. Don't worry. It's most likely a natural death. Luo Ho Xiaoming held his chin and observed. Natural death. Li Qingshan muttered to himself. He had experienced two worlds. Although they were different in size, they gave him the feeling that they had existed for a long time. He didn't think that he would see the death of a world with his own eyes. All things come and go. Even a world can't exist forever. It has its own birth and death. In this void, there are stars falling every moment. There's nothing to be surprised about. But that planet was very far from here in the first place. Li Qingshan frowned in confusion. That's why I'm sure it's a natural death. The death of a world isn't a sudden explosion. Instead, like everything else, it gradually collapses and disintegrates. It usually lasts for a long time. Once it can no longer be anchored in the void, its power will shoot out in a random direction. Who knows where it will go? I see. Li Qingshan sighed. Although this was a coincidence, in such a long journey and such a vast starry sky, it really couldn't be considered a coincidence. He stared at the incomparably huge corpse. He discovered that it was not stationary. Even the largest mountain was moving slowly, and no one knew where it would stop. The strong wind reverberated between the mountains, as if the world was breathing heavily. The magnetic field fluctuated between strong and weak, changing constantly. It was like a soul that refused to disperse. One of these two objects was originally high up in the sky, an underground place. At this moment, they blended together and became exceptionally chaotic. Countless meteorites flew in all directions. The smaller the meteorite, the bigger the meteorite. On the contrary, the might of the attack was even greater. Even a grand cultivator would not be able to match up to it. After all, it was the power of heaven and earth. Even the remnant power was not to be underestimated. Looks like we can only take a detour, Gu Yenying asked. But Qingshan, once you deviate from the path, can you still find the right path? This detour will take us tens of millions of miles. This decaying world was clearly not a small world. The thick earth had completely collapsed and spread out, filling up the void for millions of miles. A simple detour would take tens of millions of miles. It's hard to say. Li Qingshan shook his head slightly. Along the way, he had been constantly locating the position of the stars. It was not because he had nothing better to do, but because he had to constantly correct the path according to the star chart. If he took a detour like this, all his previous efforts would be wasted. There were no obvious coordinates in the void, and the stars all looked the same. He might not be able to find the right path and be completely lost in the void. I can shrink my body and go through it, Gu Yenying said. Little Ming, what do you think? Li Qingshan asked. No matter what, we must use the fastest method to leave this area as soon as possible. Luo Ho Xiaoming's expression was solemn. Why? It's best that you don't know. Little Ming Luo smiled, causing people to shudder. Then let's go through it. Gu Yenying took a deep breath. The Kuan Peng gradually shrank until its wingspan was only 3,000 meters. If it was placed in another world, it would still be a huge creature. However, in the vast void, it was even more minuscule. It spread its wings and flew towards the mountains. At that moment, she wielded the power of the Kuan Peng. She fought against the omnipresent power of magnetism while gathering strong gales to deflect the meteorites flying towards her. However, the most dangerous thing was not the meteorites, but the large and small fragments of space. They were like broken glass and were almost completely transparent. Even the Kuan-Peng had to dodge carefully, and its speed was greatly affected. Luo Ho Xiaoming's expression became more and more solemn, but he did not say anything. He stared at the surrounding scenery in a daze. When he approached a mountain that stretched for thousands of miles, Li Qingshan closed his eyes and reached out his hand. However, he did not feel the power of the earth. Was it because it was too small and could not be considered the earth? However, the largest mountain here was only this size. It was not easy to find such a large mountain in the 9 states, and it clearly included the part that originally belonged to the underground. He could clearly feel the power of the earth, and it was getting stronger and stronger. It was like a call. He could not help but be curious. What was waiting for him in front? Look over there. Gu Yenying's words broke the silence. Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming followed her line of sight and saw a huge building that was chiseled into the mountain. Although the style was different from the 9 states and it was badly damaged, they could still see the majestic atmosphere. This is definitely not something that mortals could build. It must have been a large sect. Li Qingshan sighed. The pavilions of mortals could not have been preserved at all. Even cultivators ended up like this, let alone mortals. I can still see the layout of the protective formation. It seems to have been swallowed by the magma. There's someone there. Oh, it's a stone statue. Gu Yenying vaguely saw a figure at the top of the mountain. She flew closer and realized that it was a stone statue. It was in the shape of a woman, with eyebrows and hair. It was very lifelike. It's not a stone statue. It turned itself into stone in an attempt to escape. What a fool! If it had killed itself earlier, it would have had a chance to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Luo Ho Xiaoming looked disdainful. When the world declined to a certain extent, the connection with the 6 paths of reincarnation would be severed. However, normal people would not know about this. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying then noticed the despair on the woman's face. She clearly understood that this was just a struggle before death. The void would not only swallow spiritual qi, it would also swallow souls. What was the use of turning the body into a stone statue? Gu Yenying said, maybe she is also waiting for someone. Li Qingshan stared at the woman's face and was speechless. Gu Yenying said, I'm sorry. It's fine, but the 9 states is not so easily destroyed. I think the scale of this world is no smaller than the 9 states. Do you think there will be any treasures left behind? Li Qingshan felt the calling of the power of the earth becoming stronger. When the world is destroyed, the spiritual qi will disperse. everything attached to it will also die. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought of that scene again. On the blood-red land, a child, under the guidance of his mother, shot the stars with a slingshot. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1249. Luo Ho Xiaoming's face was pale as he pressed his chest. He had already sacrificed all his strength to resolve the karmic backlash. But this memory could not be erased. Even though it was a small world, there were trillions of living beings in it. The destruction of the world and the death of all living beings without any reason or value, all because of his unwarranted malice. Even the 12 demon gods of the demon domain would not do such a thing. They would only expand the demon domain, spread their ideology, and invert good and evil. This kind of evil, even the demon gods could not compare. It was so huge that it did not feel real. It was just like the fall of a star. But the Azura path was not the demon domain. It was one of the 3 great paths of good in the 6 paths of reincarnation. And Azura was not an evil god. The world in front of him seemed to be destroyed by him. The millions of mountains pressed on his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. "Little Ming, what's wrong?" Li Qingshan asked in surprise. Luo Ho Xiaoming waved his hand weakly. Li Qingshan arrived before him in a single step and threw a punch. Boom! A flying meteorite shattered, almost smashing Luo Ho Xiaoming into meat paste. With his current condition, even if he did not die, he would be heavily injured. Li Qingshan was also shocked. He took half a step back. He felt his blood boil. The power of these meteorites was too strong. He lowered his head and asked, "Are you okay?" Luo Ho Xiaoming thanked him with difficulty. At this time, Kuan Peng had already left the mountain. It went deeper into the mountains. There were floating mountains all around. The astral wind and the magnetic force became more chaotic and violent. Kuan Peng also had to constantly change its posture, flapping its wings, controlling the astral wind and resisting the magnetic force. He controlled the atmospheric winds to fend off the magnetic field. He no longer had the time to pay attention to Li Qingshan, Rahu, and Little Ming on his back. Li Qingshan lifted Luo Ho Xiaoming up, opened the wings of wind. While absorbing the astral wind, he dodged back and forth on Kuan Peng's back when he could not dodge. He used the force field of the earth to change the direction of the meteorites. The only thing worth rejoicing was that the power of the earth was getting stronger and stronger. It provided him with an endless supply of life force. Seeing Luo Ho Xiaoming's dispirited face, Yang Kai said, as if he had returned to the state before his rebirth, he asked intentionally, "If you can survive in the void, why don't you just stay here and cultivate in a remote corner for a few thousand years? My strength should have recovered by then." We belong to the world. It didn't belong to the void. Mortals can survive on grass roots and tree bark. Spiritual energy was an indispensable resource, so he had to choose a suitable world. This is more important than anything else. The higher the level of a life form, the closer the power it grasped was to the origin. However, the closer the power was to the origin, the harder it was to absorb and transform it. For cultivators, spiritual power was equivalent to food for mortals. Even if some talented beings could break away from the need for food and absorb sunlight like plants, it was still not as convenient and fast as directly absorbing spiritual power. I see. If you return to the Azura realm, your strength should recover much faster. Li Qingshan said. The Azura realm was much larger than the 9 provinces, and the will of the world was even more powerful. As the beloved son of the Azura realm, he could receive unimaginable benefits. It was completely a blessing from the heavens. If I return before I make a full recovery, I'll be courting death. Though, if I can get a few more Azura fields, it'll be extremely useful. Luo Ho Xiaoming hesitated before making a rare request. "Once I return to the 9 provinces, I'll help you get a few." Li Qingshan, generously accepted the request at the expense of others. He was going to the Dragon Province to kill Crown Prince Si Qing anyway. When the time came, he could teach the old and young a lesson along the way. Getting a few Azura fields back would be a piece of cake. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought about it, but it's not like there's no treasure here. Since atmospheric winds and magnetic fields still exist, there might be heavenly wind marrow and earth fiendish magnetic poles. They can be used to forge innate arcane treasures. These world fragments are extremely valuable as well, but it's a pity that we can't collect them right now. Innate arcane treasures. Li Qingshan was greatly interested. Heavenly wind marrow. Does it really exist? I'd always thought it was a legend, and I even went out of my way to search for it. Gu Yenying was extremely interested as well. Her jade folding fan from the past was already unusable, and she just happened to be lacking a new fan. These two items exist with the world, like the bloodline beneath the skin. They'll only appear when the world collapses and the outside world collapses. Obviously, they won't be found normally, but once the bloodline is extracted, the world will decline even faster. Then aren't we in a treasure trove? This world is already dead anyway, so we can search for the corpses. Li Qingshan's eyes shone brightly. He felt like while the space was dangerous, it did not necessarily lack fortuitous encounters. But I'd advise you not to deviate too much from the path, and you shouldn't stay here for too long either. This isn't a safe place. Luo Ho Xiaoming did not say anything in the beginning because he did not want them to stay for too long. He muttered to himself, perhaps there's something like that in such a large world. Something like that. There's no need to think about it. There are still traces of heavenly wind marrow and earth fiend magnetic pole, and there are many of them. Those things don't have any aura at all, and even if there's only a tiny bit of them, we can only have a chance to discover them by shattering these mountains, or there might not be any at all. But if we can find one, it'll be worth it. It's a pity that we're too weak now. When Luo Ho Xiaoming talked about the heavenly wind marrow and earth fiend magnetic pole, he still appeared abnormally calm. He had shattered countless worlds, so he naturally would not be too interested in these common goods. But when he mentioned those things, he still revealed a hint of interest. Li Qingshan said anxiously, you said it was so lively, but what exactly is it? Gu Yenying suddenly reminded him, be careful in front. A large number of meteorites whizzed over, big and small, numbering in the tens of thousands. If the larger ones landed in the 9 provinces, they could directly flatten the Great Buddha Mountain. Killing a few grand cultivators in small chunks would be as easy as pie. The area they covered was so large that even the Kuan Peng could not dodge. It could only gather astral winds and prepare to face them head-on. Li Qingshan's expression was solemn. He crossed his arms in a circle, fully activating the earthly force field. Invisible gravity pulled and pulled, sending some meteorites flying far away, and some smashing into each other. Not only did it protect him and Xiaoming, it also protected the Kuan Peng beneath them. Luo Ho Xiaoming sighed. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I really wouldn't believe that this is something a demon king can do. Li Qingshan looked at his own hands. Although the ox demon divine art had always been smooth, this time he had really exceeded his usual level. It was most likely due to the influence of that earthly force. He suspected that it was what Luo Ho Xiaoming was talking about, so he spoke of the power he had sensed. You can actually sense the life soil of the 9 heavens. Luo Ho Xiaoming was astonished. Just how many divine arts and techniques did he have? The earthly force was a type of source energy. Life soil of the 9 heavens, what is that? After such a long time, Li Qingshan finally heard the 2 words 9 heavens again. Floating astronomy. After all, the rock was only a shadow, and there was a limit to the astral winds it could control. Now, with such a shield, there was nothing to worry about. Luo Ho Xiaoming opened the Qianquan bag. Li Qingshan waved his hands forcefully, and the astral wind marrow flowed into the bag. He let out a sigh of relief. This is indeed good stuff. I wonder what the Earth Fiend magnetic force looks like. Luo Ho Xiaoming opened his heaven and earth pouch, and Li Qingshan waved his hands forcefully, and the essence of wind of heavenly strength flowed into it. He let out a sigh of relief. It really is good stuff. I wonder what the Earth Fiend magnetic field looks like. However, in the following journey, they didn't even see the astral wind marrow, much less the Earth Fiend magnetic force. This filled him with regret. According to Luo Ho Xiaoming, as the world was destroyed, the astral wind marrow and the Earth Fiend magnetic force would disappear as well. There were many world fragments floating around, and they wouldn't be melted by the void. However, it was also because of this that even the Qianquan bag couldn't store them. Perhaps only another world could devour and digest them. Li Qingshan asked curiously, "You said that every moment in the void is a world being destroyed. In that case, there should be world fragments everywhere. However, we've been flying all the way here, but why haven't we seen a single piece? Also, although the world's collapse would cause the spiritual qi to dissipate, such a large amount of earth and rocks wouldn't disappear for no reason. We haven't seen any meteors either. Things that the void can't digest will naturally be digested by other things. Void-devouring beasts." Gu Yenying asked, "You've even heard of the void-devouring beasts. With your cultivation, you're really knowledgeable." Gu Yenying smiled and said, "I've even seen an eyeball of a void-devouring beast. A corpse king from the Hungry Ghost realm once used it to invade the 9 states. It sealed a large region and was almost devoured by the Hungry Ghost realm." Luo Ho Xiaoming said with certainty, "That must have been obtained by chance. Even the weakest void-devouring beast isn't something a mere corpse king can deal with." Li Qingshan also recalled the devastation of that battle. That was the first time he came into contact with the 6 paths of reincarnation. He smiled and said, "If we can kill 2 more void-devouring beasts and play with a few eyeballs, that would be even better. Let's hope your jinx doesn't come true." The void-devouring beasts are the scavengers of the void. They can devour anything, and world fragments are their favorite food. It won't be long before more void-devouring beasts are attracted here. Let's quickly take the living soil of the 9 heavens and leave. The Kuan Peng flew for another hundreds of thousands of miles and stopped, staring at a small mountain 10,000 miles away. Chapter 1251. Great Harvest. Li Qingshan whistled, but he immediately found it troublesome, as there were no mountains nearby that he could hide in. Even if he went a little further away, the gravitational effect would just be slightly weaker at worst. However, the Earth's Fiend magnetic field was extraordinarily difficult to deal with. Even from such a great distance, it could disperse demon qi slightly. If he drew closer, wouldn't the effects be even greater? Sigh, looks like I can only take it slow. Even if it was for the living soil of the 9 heavens, he could not give up now. He was just about to let Gu Yenying fly to the nearest mountain. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "How long are you going to do this? Do you really want to wait for the void-devouring beasts to swallow us all? Then what do you think we should do? We can't just give up like this, can we?" Li Qingshan could clearly sense that the living soil of the 9 heavens calling out to him might just be an illusion. However, there was one thing he was certain of. This living soil of the 9 heavens would be of great benefit to the ox demon transformation. He was truly unwilling to give up just like this. Here, Luo Ho Xiaoming handed the cosmos sack to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan took the cosmos sack and said in shock, "For me? Scram. I'll lend it to you. Haha, how petty." Li Qingshan injected demonic qi and could immediately control the cosmos sack. Clearly, it was Luo Ho Xiaoming who had made things easier for him. Although he did not say anything, he was rather moved. Only with such trust could he live up to the words, "We're in the same boat. Let me teach you how to use it." Luo Ho Xiaoming said slowly. Li Qingshan nodded as he listened. This cosmos sack was a divine weapon. It was definitely not as simple as an upgraded Sumeru ring. It was like a small world of its own. He tossed the cosmos sack high up, and it rapidly expanded in the air. In the blink of an eye, it was hundreds of li wide. And this was with Li Qingshan's power being limited. Otherwise, it could be even bigger. There was no way to know where its limits were. "Open!" With a shout, Li Qingshan opened his Qianquan pouch wide like a man, with a big belly opening his mouth. He took a deep breath, and the astral winds that filled the sky rushed over with a whistling sound. Wisps of heavenly astral wind marrow entered his pocket. However, the earth-fiendish magnetic fields were not affected at all. They continued to move about randomly in the void space. Their nature was completely different from the heavenly astral wind marrow. They looked like solid objects, but they weren't affected by the astral winds at all. They flickered with light like ball-shaped lightning bolts. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "Use your gravity." "I know." Li Qingshan opened his arms. Activating the earthly force field, he locked onto the earth-fiendish magnetism field one by one. However, things did not go as smoothly as he had imagined. Although the earth-fiendish magnetic forces were attracted, they were clearly more unwilling to leave that small mountain. Just like that, they fell into a stalemate. It was unknown how long it would take to pull them over. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and sensed the existence of the small mountain. In the cold and empty void, there was a kind of motherly warmth. He said quietly, "Please lend me your power." The strong gravity released by the small mountain suddenly weakened, while Li Qingshan's earth force field kept growing stronger. Instantly, those earth-fiendish magnetic fields shot over like arrows leaving the bowstrings. They all fell into the Qianquan pouch. The red string tightened, and the pouch's mouth was sealed. It gradually shrank and fell into Li Qingshan's hands again. The pouch bulged like it was filled with wind, and Li Qingshan handed it over to Luo Ho Xiaoming. It seemed to be just an ordinary money pouch with a few ingots of silver in it. Luo Ho Xiaoming reached out his hand and took it. He then hung it around his waist, looking as calm as ever. The void was cleared up, but a great number of broken pieces of worlds were still floating in the air. They were much denser than any other places they had been through so far. Unless Kuan Peng shrunk his body even more, he still wouldn't be able to approach the small mountain. Li Qingshan gave it a try. Although the earth force field could also affect the broken pieces of worlds, it couldn't even store them in the Qianquan pouch, because the nature of the broken pieces of worlds was definitely not weaker than the Qianquan pouch, and might even be more powerful. However, there was no need to feel pity. Just collecting so many heavenly wind marrow and earth-fiendish magnetic fields was already a great harvest for this journey. But the best was always at the end. 9 heaven living soil, here I come. Li Qingshan spread his phoenix wings and said to Luo Ho Xiaoming, "Lend me some wind." Luo Ho Xiaoming opened a small opening in the Qianquan pouch, and a gust of strong wind blew out. Li Qingshan's wings of wind stretched out for thousands of meters, and he flew up with the wind. There was no resistance in the void, and his speed was extremely fast. He activated the earth force field, and his speed instantly increased by a few times. At the same time, he kept changing his body shape, dodging the broken pieces of worlds. It was his first time flying so fast with his own power, and he could somewhat understand Gu Yeniying's pursuit. However, what he yearned for was not the sky, and he hated the silence of the void even more. Feeling the call of the earth, he was like a child throwing himself into his mother's embrace, flying toward a small mountain. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "He won't crash into the mountain and die, right?" Gu Yenying said, "I don't think so." From their point of view, Li Qingshan was practically crashing into a small mountain. It was only when he was within 100 miles that he suddenly spread his wings and changed his stance, but his speed was still extremely fast. In the instant he was about to crash into the mountain, he threw out a punch with all his might. The small mountain collapsed soundlessly, and Li Qingshan went deep into the belly of the mountain through the cracks. When he reached the center, he finally saw the legendary nine-heaven living soil. Sure enough, it was as Luo Ho Xiaoming had said. There was nothing special about it at all. It seemed like an extremely ordinary piece of yellow-brown soil. It did not give off any spiritual qi at all, let alone glow. Moreover, it was only the size of a fist. However, in Li Qingshan's heart, the tiny piece of soil was even vaster and heavier than the millions of mountains. Only when countless rocks were piled together could they be called a mountain. Only when endless soil was deposited together could they be called the earth. However, on the tiny piece of soil, every single bump was like a mountain, and every single depression was like an abyss. It seemed to be the origin and symbol of the word earth. No matter when, where, how big or small it was, it would not affect its essence at all. Li Qingshan slowly extended his hands. Approaching the living soil of the nine heaven, Brother Ox's figure suddenly appeared in his head, and the scenery before him changed. From when he first practiced the fist technique in Crouching Ox Village to the various cultivation experiences, afterwards the first layer, the second layer, all the way to the fifth layer of the Ox Demon, he went through every single ability of the Ox Demon transformation in a single moment. He actually felt like he had mastered them all. He could not help but say sternly, "The Ox Demon's great strength sinks in the mud." The sixth layer of the Ox Demon transformation no longer posed any obstruction to him. As a matter of fact, he could break through right now and obtain the unprecedented strength of the Ox Demon. He sucked in a deep breath and held back his excitement. He never thought just seeing the living soil of the nine heaven would bring him so much benefit. It was like the spirit turtle obtaining the power of ruins end. The power of ruins end was vast and boundless. So how could it be mentioned in the same breath as the living soil of the nine heaven? A world no smaller than the 9 provinces only possessed a tiny piece of the living soil of the nine heaven, and it might not even exist. Just how precious and rare was it? Chapter 1252. Li Qingshan couldn't help but clench the living soil of the nine heavens tightly. His entire body was trembling slightly. That power didn't fill up his body and make him feel like exploding. Instead, it was boundless and thick, wrapping him gently within it. The living soil of the nine heavens didn't need to be refined, nor could it be refined. If he wanted to use it, the power would be used by him. If he didn't want to use it, the power would still be here. The spiritual power contained in any spiritual stone would be exhausted, but its power was endless. Gu Yenying stared at the small mountain. Even though the Kunping had extremely strong eyesight, it was still as small as a grain of sand from thousands of miles away. She worriedly said, "Little Ming, why isn't he out yet? Could it be that something happened to him?" Luo Ho Xiaoming said meaningfully, "You care about him a lot." "Yeah." Gu Yenying smiled, not trying to hide it. "Be careful not to damage your Taoist heart because of your personal feelings. Thank you for the reminder. I've been careful to control myself. However, if my Taoist heart is strong, Even if it's just a small personal feelings I'm still lacking. I hope I can be like him in the future. Gu Yenying smiled. That's true. I really wonder who taught that guy. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought about Li Qingshan. That guy was simply full of personal feelings. He never saw any feelings as an obstacle. Sometimes he was even so optimistic that he was almost naive. Yet he was still able to advance bravely. He wasn't very smart, but he was able to see through everything. Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't help but admire him. However, there was one exception. Their current journey was simply too personal, and they couldn't let go of things. He didn't know what kind of charm that little and had. He was able to make a person like him unable to forget him. I think it must be someone from above the 9 heavens. Gu Yenying felt that her horizons had broadened a lot during her decades of association with Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming. She was no longer limited to the small 9 states. Her identity as the daughter of the Eagle God was not even worth mentioning. Luo Ho Xiaoming joked, "It just so happens that if he dies, we won't have to go to the 9 states." "No, I still have to go back to the 9 states." Gu Yenying was determined, whether it was for the promise or for her personal feelings. The destination of this trip would not change. At least let him rest in peace. All right then, let's wish fellow Taoist Li a long life. Luo Ho Xiaoming shrugged his shoulders, but this was also within his expectations. If he didn't have this bit of persistence, how could he be qualified to be in the same team as him? Look, he came out. He seems to be very happy. Li Qingshan's figure leaped out of the crevice of the small mountain and stood there, roaring in his heart, "You 2 bastards! Are you done yet? You're the ones who are dead. You're the ones who can rest in peace. You're the ones who can live to 100 years old." Although they were separated by a great distance, their thoughts were connected, and they could even sense the strong emotions in their hearts. Otherwise, how could Gu Yenying see whether Li Qingshan's expression was happy or unhappy from such a distance? Gu Yenying said, how is the 9 heaven life soil? Is it as amazing as the legends say? Although the life soil of the 9 heaven has many wondrous uses, it's not that easy to use. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, the closer a power was to the origin, the harder it was to use it. This was common sense in the world. Humph, you guys better watch carefully. Li Qingshan spread his legs, his left hand at his waist, and his right hand tightly grasped the life soil of the 9 heaven. It was not that he particularly liked islands, but the moon's reflection could only pass through things of this size. Although there were no longer any living creatures in the dead world, the corpses that were still warm still contained a lot of information. Many new, strange life forms would definitely be born from these islands. However, perhaps it should not be said to be so absolute. The woman who had turned into a rock was so strong that even flames and tremors could not destroy it. Suddenly, a crack appeared on her despairing face. Even though all the spiritual qi had dissipated, there might still be a wisp of spirit or obsession left. And those medicinal pills and magic treasures that had lost their value also recovered a touch of spiritual light under the nourishment of the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan's voice suddenly rang through the entire world. Do you want my power? Then go and find it in the depths of the sea. A brand new era had begun. The hero king had never left. Floating astronomy. Chapter 12:54. Luo Ho and Little Ming suddenly looked back. At this moment, countless mountains were being pulled by gravity and gathered together, blocking their line of sight. Between the cracks, he could see a few stars embedded in the depths of space, shining silently. They were distant and silent, but he could sense a hint of uneasiness from them. Gu Yenying followed his gaze as well. Something's wrong. There's a bad omen. The first to speak was actually Li Qingshan. The spirit turtle's warning had turned good fortune into bad, and it was a very bad omen. The shadow of death that enveloped him was as dark and heavy as the void. Luo Hoshaoming said, "If you're done playing, let's leave here as soon as possible. Let's go." Although there were still many mountains and fragments of worlds that he had yet to absorb, Li Qingshan did not hesitate at all. With a wave of his hand, he put away the water mirror's image and reversed the force field. He pushed the mountains and meteors away and flew towards the Kunping. Their vision widened. Gu Yening's eyes narrowed. Something was approaching from the depths of space. At first, it was only the size of a speck of dust, but it enlarged in the blink of an eye. She cried out involuntarily, so fast. That thing moved no slower than the Kunping. Even its body was no smaller than the Kunping. However, it did not resemble any bird or beast. It did not even seem like a carapace. It was a translucent green, revealing its internal organs. There seemed to be a tentacle that was even longer than its body, where its head should be. It created a ripple in space as it swam over quickly. Luo Hoshaoming said, "It's a void-devouring beast." How powerful is this thing? How many heavenly tribulations has it undergone? Can we destroy it? Li Qingshan could not help but ask. His strength had just reached an unprecedented level, and he could already sense such great danger. He was rather unused to it. He wanted to fight to his heart's content in space. Void-devouring beasts don't undergo heavenly tribulations, and they're different from other living beings. They're basically a natural disaster. I'd advise you to run for your life obediently. The smell of blood has spread out in the sea. It won't just attract one shark. As soon as Luo Hoshaoming finished speaking, void-devouring beasts appeared from all directions. Every one of them had a different shape. Some had a round body, with countless short tentacles. Some looked like a yellow jellyfish. The head was uneven. There were 7 or 8 long legs growing out from the bottom. Some of them had no stable shape and were constantly changing like liquid. They were simply ugly monsters that were beyond imagination in nightmares. However, every single one of them was over 1,000 miles long, and the largest one was over 10,000 miles long. If this figure was a living being, then it would be extremely terrifying. Every one of them was probably a godlike existence. What the hell are these things? Let's go. Li Qingshan immediately retracted his battle intent. He landed lightly on the Kunpeng's back. He didn't want to start a fight with this group of things. "Qingshan, open a path for me." The wings of the Kunpeng spanned 1,000 miles. He returned to his original form. All right. Li Qingshan gripped the living soil of the 9 heavens tightly and activated his earthly force field. Like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves, he swept away the layers of mountains and meteorites, clearing all obstacles. At this moment, the void-devouring beasts had already gathered. They were like ants attracted by breadcrumbs, fighting to devour everything in the air. The mountains that stretched for several thousand miles were devoured by 2 void-devouring beasts in a few moments. The spatial fragments were the main focus of their fight. Li Qingshan couldn't help but rejoice that he still had the spirit tortoise to foretell good or bad luck. Even though it was unharmed, its speed was greatly slowed down. Li Qingshan was delighted. It was indeed useful. Punch after punch, the void-devouring beast slowed down again, and the distance between it and the Kunpeng grew larger and larger. Gradually, the void-devouring beast seemed tiny. Suddenly, the void-devouring beast disappeared in the void, as if it had never existed. "Did you shake it off?" Gu Yening asked. Li Qingshan knitted his brows, but the sense of danger in his heart did not disappear. Instead, the shadow of death grew heavier. Luo Hoshaoming yelled, No, it's in front of us. Li Qingshan abruptly turned around, and the void-devouring beast suddenly appeared in front of him. Its enormous body filled his field of vision, and its translucent skin glowed with a green light. Suddenly, a 1,000-mile-long abyss appeared in its body, stretching across the void and waiting for the Kuan Peng to walk right into its trap. Ji Hao finally understood why these void-devouring beasts were so fast, and why they could actually teleport over such a long distance in the void. Chapter 1256. The sound of the bell was chaotic, the soul wanted to break, and the white bones turned into a beautiful face. Her skin was white as jade, her hair was black as sandalwood, and her flesh was like a lotus flower. The towering trees and the towering towers were all reflected in the netherworld eye. Life and death were both clear to him, but there was still a stubborn thought that he couldn't abandon his original intention. Suddenly, he felt his heart palpitate and couldn't help but look at the sky. Was he in danger again? Ding! The bell on her waist urged her to come back to her senses. She didn't have time to think too much. She took a few steps in the air barefooted and landed on the top of a big tree. She said softly, "Thank you, Senior." The banyan tree king sighed in his heart. It had been a long time since he had seen her so polite. He knew that she was doing this for the sake of this battle, not letting any details affect the overall situation. And if they lost this battle, this courtesy would probably turn into terrifying hostility. This battle is not just for you and me, nor is it just for anyone here. It's for all living beings in the 9 states. Fellow Taoists, please accept my control for the time being. Only in this way can we unite as one and defeat the enemy. All the demons said, "We're willing to listen to fellow Taoists' orders." The banyan tree king knew that this was his limit, but it was enough. There is no need for me to elaborate on the dangers involved. The laws of heaven and earth in this area have already been contaminated by the hungry ghost realm. Your Majesty, please use the Silver Dragon King to test it out first. All right, the King of Southern, you said. The main cannon at the front of the Silver Dragon King opened up, and specks of silver light gathered, condensing and compressing to the limit, forming a ball of light. With a buzzing sound, a magnificent silver light shot towards the ghost tower. This strike was enough to split mountains and split the earth, but as soon as it entered the land of death, the bright silver light was shrouded in a layer of gray haze, rapidly weakening. A ghost king supervisor swung his whip. The whip cracked the silver light, and the shattered light was quickly swallowed by the gray haze, as if it had never existed. TSK. Foolish creatures, you only know how to play these kinds of tricks. The ghouls roared with laughter. The King of Southern Yu's face changed slightly. Even attacks of pure energy were affected like this. If he personally entered the tower, he would definitely be greatly suppressed. The surroundings of the ghost tower were basically a forbidden zone for the living. He glanced at little Anne. She was the only exception. But in this way, this was a great blow to morale. No one knew what the Banyan Tree King was planning. The Banyan Tree King said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoists, as you can see, do not rashly approach the ghost pagoda. You must maintain a safe distance to attack." Grandpa Tree, but if we don't get close to the ghost tower, how are we going to attack it? A giant lumberkin king asked. The Silver Dragon King's attack range and destructive power far surpassed that of ordinary demon kings and grand cultivators. 1,000 miles away, ordinary divine abilities and dharma spells couldn't even touch it, let alone be weakened and suppressed. Don't worry, we also have strong reinforcements. Powerful reinforcements. Could it be the North Moon's demon king, Li Qingshan? Many people did not know that Li Qingshan was no longer in this world. Li Fengyuan was high above Cloud City, When he heard this, his heart ached, and he muttered to himself, "Eldest father." Qingshan, the unraging monk, also sighed inside. He had specially asked Little and about Li Qingshan's whereabouts, but never did he think this brilliant disciple of his would actually leave this world like this. Little An's clothes ruffled as she stared at the ghost pagoda in the distance, as if she heard nothing. If Qingshan were here, our chances of victory would increase drastically. The banyan tree king sighed in amazement. This kid could always exceed his expectations, turning the impossible into the possible. But unfortunately, he can't come. The powerful reinforcements I'm talking about are not people of my generation, but this world. His voice was grand, piercing through the surroundings. Countless branches and roots formed a pair of arms, extending towards the sky and throwing themselves into the whistling atmospheric winds. It truly stood tall, but it was like the people of ancient times who prayed to the heavens for rain. It was filled with piety and reverence. The heavens seemed to be moved by this sincerity. The winds whistled down and dispersed the dark clouds in the sky. Immediately, the sky was clear and the sun shone down. Soon afterwards, the banyan tree king's body straightened up again. The roots that had plunged deep into the ground split into two bundles, forming a pair of strong legs. Afterwards, he pulled his legs out and strode forward, stepping into this land of death. Boom! The ground shook, splitting open into ravines. The invisible fiendish magnetic field surged, purging away all the ghostly miasma. Even though the ghost pagoda was not built on the ground, it seemed to waver before the might of the world. Gazing at the towering treant, the ghouls could no longer laugh. He definitely had not come to throw his life away. They also sensed the hostility of the entire world. Everyone, human and demon alike, was stunned by the banyan tree king's power. Perhaps he could no longer be called the banyan tree king. How could a demon king describe such power? Even the banyan tree king himself was using such great power for the first time. This was no longer his own power. This was the world's unwillingness to be devoured by the hungry ghost realm, as well as its hatred towards all external invaders. The world of the 9 prefectures was far larger than a small world, and the will of the world was even stronger and more powerful. The banyan tree king had borrowed the wrath of the world and used the might of the world to destroy the geographical advantage formed by the ghost pagoda. Boom, boom, boom. The banyan tree king walked towards the ghost pagoda step by step. Every step he took covered a distance of 10,000 jam. Wherever he stepped, plants would grow crazily, flowers would bloom, and the distorted laws of heaven and earth would return to normal. No, it was not just normal. Everyone could clearly sense the existence of the heaven's will. Surging spiritual chi gathered in his body, and he could circulate it freely like never before. The mystical abilities and techniques that originally needed to be fully concentrated could now be released at any time, borrowing the power of heaven and earth. This battle had been blessed by the heavens. Chapter 1257. The banyan tree king finally arrived in front of the sky-reaching ghost pagoda. The land of death within a radius of 3,000 li had turned into a grassland filled with blooming flowers. Only the area within a radius of 100 li around the ghost pagoda was still covered in thick gray haze, making it seem even darker. Although 100 miles wasn't too far, it still had a huge impact. An attack launched from 100 miles away would not be able to damage this ghost tower in the slightest. The banyan tree king understood that the instincts of the hungry ghost realm were not to be underestimated. The world of the 9 prefectures could only give them so much help. They could only rely on themselves for the rest. Fellow Taoist Feng Yuan, please make your move. There was only one white cloud in the clear sky. It was the city amongst the clouds, and it was currently floating above the heavenly ghost tower. Li Fengyuan nodded slightly. With a bang, he spread his magnificent wings, revealing the innate disposition of a king. He closed his eyes and gently waved his hand. The thick layer of clouds under his feet rippled with waves of light, becoming even more snow-white and bright. All of the winged people were ready. They spread their wings and glowed with radiance as they poured their power into the city amongst the clouds. The white clouds became brighter and brighter, as if they were no longer clouds, but a mass of floating white light. The defensive formation of the city vaguely appeared, and the spherical barrier was full of complicated and beautiful runes. All the light gathered at the bottom of the spherical barrier, as if a second sun had appeared in the sky. Li Fengyuan opened his eyes, which were filled with light. Sky strike! The sky darkened, and an incomparably resplendent beam of light whizzed down, directly hitting the top of the Tong Tian Ghost Tower. It was still under construction, and it was the biggest weakness of the Tong Tian Ghost Tower. The light beam pierced through the layers of death chi and continued to descend. Rays of light shot out from the cracks of the ghost tower. The light shone in all directions. The white bones at the top were vaporized by the light, and the ghost tower was shaved off layer by layer. A corpse king that was thousands of feet tall stood at the top of the pagoda. Its reaction was slightly slower, and a large part of its body was cut off by the white light falling straight to the bottom of the pagoda. The king of southern Yu gazed at the magnificent sight through the porthole and sighed emotionally. It really is the holy land of the feathered people after all. Even the full-powered strike from the silver dragon king pales in comparison. It was said that the original flying dragon ship had been inspired by the city amongst the clouds. Now, it seemed that it was still far from that. The mutants are indeed magical. Your Majesty is too greedy. The winged men had existed for tens of thousands of years, but there was only one city amongst the clouds, and there were many more dragon king warships. This attack seemed to have gathered the power of all the winged people in the world, and there were many who had gone through 3 heavenly tribulations. Of course, they can't be compared. There were many great cultivators here. However, it would directly accuse the king of Southern Yu of being greedy. He was not from the Mist Province, but the abbot of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, the dauntless monk. The Tong Tian Ghost Tower was built in Qingzhou, and it was the only remaining branch of the 3 great sects in Qingzhou. Naturally, he had to make a move. Otherwise, once the hungry ghost realm successfully invaded, the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, that had only just established its foundation, would face a great calamity again. Under the Ghost King Overseer's command, all of the Corpse Kings and Ghost Kings fired simultaneously. Hee, let's teach this damn tree a lesson. A streak of silver light shot out from the side, dispersing the volley of ghouls. The Silver Dragon King's figure appeared from behind the Banyan Tree King. All of the great cultivators appeared, gathering into a strand of spiritual chi that rushed into the air. They unleashed everything they had in their lives to attack the ghost tower. With a caw, a large yellow bird landed lightly on the Banyan Tree King's shoulder and let out a melodious cry. The cry was somewhat similar to Little Anne's chaotic soul bell, but it was filled with vigorous vitality and surging deathly aura. A large, colorful snake coiled around the tree, opened its bloody mouth, and shot out 2 streams of venom from its sharp teeth. It was blocked by a Corpse King's corpse wall and dissolved into a cloud of deathly aura. In an instant, a group of demons gathered, huge beasts circled around, and demonic chi surged. Between the sky-reaching ghost tower and the towering tree, light and shadows intertwined. They were only separated by 5 kilometers, but they were divided into 2 worlds. Between them, the laws of life and death clashed intensely. Both the living and the dead were unwilling to leave their own world and step into the other's world. Even the banyan tree king was rooted in the 9 provinces, his arms tightly grasping the sky-reaching ghost tower, pushing it with all his might. The white bones that formed the tower groaned. Some of the tiny bones fractured, rumbling like a world collapsing. However, the white bones that were as thick as mountains only twisted slightly. Clearly, that alone was not enough to make the tower topple over. Formation scrolls appeared one after another. They were the true backbone of the sky-reaching ghost tower. Someone had to venture in and destroy the structure of the ghost tower. And out of everyone present, only a single person could transcend life and death. Little N's 2 swords flew backwards like wings, stepping on the banyan tree king and rushing towards the ghost tower. Her figure seemed so insignificant, but it was still as vast as a firefly in the darkness. Once she moved, she immediately attracted everyone's attention. The Ghost King's supervisor barked, "She's here?" Who said they can kill her? They'll definitely undergo the 4th heavenly tribulation. No, the 5th heavenly tribulation, and become a sovereign. The Corpse King and Ghost King roared out. Right when the Dark Queen was about to follow, Little N's voice rang out in her ear, "Mother, stay further away." Even though the Dark Queen had spent many years with ghosts, she was still a living being in essence. She definitely would not be welcomed by the laws of death, let alone the fact that she was venturing deep into enemy territory. The Dark Queen's heart warmed up. She understood she was already much more powerful than herself, so she would only drag her down if she followed along. As a result, she halted her steps and controlled the void-bellied Ghost King to follow her, but she was also filled with worry. The Corpse King that had most of its body cut off fell into the gate of hungry ghosts and sank into the depths. It gathered the chi of death in a hurry to repair its body. Actually, he originally had the opportunity to dodge that strike, but the battle was far too dangerous. If it was a demigod that could control the laws of the world, then so be it. When the hungry ghost realm devoured worlds, it never cared about these tiny obstacles. What mattered was that woman called Little, and if legends came to an end so easily, they would not be legends anymore. He would be better off avoiding this battle. He sank straight into the very depths of the Gate of Hungry Ghosts. Suddenly, the top and bottom reversed, and the familiar hungry ghost realm appeared before him again. Dark clouds that never dispersed enveloped the barren land, piling up layers upon layers of bones. However, before he could admire it, a black shadow enveloped him, strangling his body inch by inch. He was unable to fight back at all. "Emperor Li, I'm heavily injured. I can't fight anymore," the Corpse King called out, only to discover that there were many Ghost Kings and Corpse Kings in the surroundings. There were even a few Ghost Emperors, all of them staring at him, either viciously or coldly, but none of them had any intentions of entering the mouth of hungry ghosts to assist the ghost tower. He immediately understood that his judgment was correct. He was just bait, hanging on the hook, waiting for the fish to eat him. With the Corpse Kings and Ghost Kings as bait, the sky-reaching ghost tower as the hook, and the world of the 9 provinces as the water, he was fishing for a legendary fish. Who else could the person holding the pole be apart from Emperor Li? He said coldly, "How dare you play tricks like this on me?" "I didn't." Before he could even finish his sentence, the Corpse King's colossal body fell to pieces. The ghouls in the surroundings scrambled for food, like a pack of starving wild dogs. Only the Ghost Emperors did not move. Devouring the Corpse King no longer brought them much benefit. They were reluctant to embarrass themselves before Emperor Li. A Ghost Emperor asked respectfully, "Emperor Li, why don't you wait for the fong of hungry ghosts to be completed and devour that world first?" The Fong of Hungry Ghosts, the true name of the sky-reaching ghost tower. The invaded world was like being pierced by the sharp teeth of a hungry ghost, unable to break free. Her strength is already close to ascension. Before the Fong of Hungry Ghosts is completed, there is no guarantee that nothing will go wrong. Compared to her, that world is nothing. You are not strong enough to hear the voice of the hungry ghost realm. What it wants to eat the most this time is not that world. I have never felt it so eager, not even when it was devouring the great world. This battle concerns the rise and fall of our Mystician lineage. We must not let our guard down. Yes. The white bones that were thousands of feet long started burning and gradually melted in the flames. Immediately after, the two connected white bones also started burning. The sky-reaching ghost tower was like a bonfire that had been ignited by sparks. The raging flames burned away the thick aura of death. This sword, the soul of the abandoned immortal sword, was also speechless. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the white light that shot out from the city amongst the clouds penetrated downward, illuminating the ghost tower. Meanwhile, the combined attacks of the cultivators and demon kings heavily injured the tree roots of the ghost tower and destroyed several dozen formations. The situation on the battlefield was reversed. They immediately gained the upper hand. Little and stood in the roaring flames. The blackness around her gradually faded as she stared down at the gate of hungry ghosts. The ghouls stared at the flames in fright, feeling an instinctive fear. They almost wanted to retreat into the gate of hungry ghosts. However, a tremendous presence suddenly rose up from the gate of hungry ghosts. Two specks of green light grew brighter and brighter, and a dragon's roar rang out, filled with brutality. A corpse dragon rushed out of the gate of hungry ghosts. The king of Southern you said, "It's the body of a true dragon." The dragons were the most renowned and flourishing among all divine beasts. This world had once been ruled by the dragons, so they were born with strength and intelligence. Even if they died, it would still be a significant matter. Although the corpse dragon king was only at the third heavenly tribulation, its strength could not be compared to regular corpse kings. Afterwards, corpse kings and ghost kings emerged from the hungry ghost realm one after another. There were plenty of powerful and wondrous existences, like the corpse dragon king. The reinforcements from the hungry ghost realm had arrived. However, the banyan tree king let out a sigh of relief inside. It would be far too strange if there were no reinforcements even now. However, a bitter battle was unavoidable. They had to destroy the core of the ghost tower as soon as possible so that they could use the power of the world to suppress and seal the gate of hungry ghosts. Chapter 1259. The corpse dragon king was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. Just as it was about to raise its head and breathe, it was engulfed by the sea of flames. It panicked and circulated its corpse chi to defend, but a white figure passed by it, little, and fell straight down, avoiding the mountain-sized white bones. The chaotic soul bell rang hurriedly, and the celestial abandoned sword cut through the layers of obstacles, not entangling with any of the enemies. As he approached the gate of hungry ghosts, he suddenly felt a trace of unease. However, if he could not destroy the ghost tower and seal the gate of hungry ghosts as soon as possible, he would definitely lose this battle. Thus, he made up his mind and headed straight for the core of the ghost tower. However, more and more corpse kings and ghost kings stepped out of the gate of hungry ghosts, and more enemies blocked their way. The attacks of the cultivators and the monster kings were all blocked by the ghost tower, so it was difficult for them to help. Thus, she charged into the enemy's formation alone. Even though she was riding the momentum of the fire, she couldn't help but be injured again and again. Many cracks appeared on her bones. The banyan tree king knew that success or failure depended on this, so he lunged forward. Millions of roots penetrated the ghost tower and entangled the ghoul opening a path for her. Little and finally got close to the core of the ghost tower. With the two swords in his hands, he crossed them and slashed down with all his might. All of a sudden, the core of the ghost pagoda shrunk into a single point, bursting forth with a deep and serene light, stopping the tip of the sword from advancing any further. Emperor Li's voice came from within. "The fish has taken the bait." As he spoke, the entire ghost pagoda began to collapse inwards. The gigantic white bones suddenly shrunk by 100 times, turning into a cage of white bones, trapping Little and within. Then it rapidly fell down. Not good, it's a trap. The Banyan Tree King sent billions of aerial roots towards the prison of bones, but the closer they got to the gate of hungry ghosts, the faster they withered. Furthermore, there were over 100 corpse ghouls, and all of them were kings who had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations. They had the geographical advantage and formed a formation that no roots could pass through. The flames in Little N's eye sockets gathered. He raised the abandoned immortal sword and the Buddha's slaying sword before slowly lowering them. It was impossible for the blade to cut through the white bones, so there was no need to try. Perhaps she had no chance of winning from the very beginning. She was alone. How could he go against the hungry ghost realm, one of the 6 paths of reincarnation? He looked up at the sparse stars through the gap in the cage. He silently said in his heart, "Qingshan, I'm sorry, I have to break my promise." The gate of hungry ghosts cracked open a little more, as if it couldn't wait to swallow her. Black Moon. The Dark Queen crossed her fingers and formed a seal. It emitted a faint purplish-blue light. Her figure was faintly discernible. It gradually became blurry, faint, and thin. Suddenly, it disappeared and reappeared in the white bone prison. In the dim light, Little N's figure gradually became clear, and she regained her stunning beauty. She was slightly stunned. "Mother!" The Dark Queen turned around and gazed at Little and in delight. Her lips parted, but not a single sound or thought could make it out of the cage of bones. "The King of Southern You said, it's the umbral insect's displacement transposition. Bitch, you are also a disciple of the Black Moon sect. How dare you ruin my plans? I will torture your soul to the utmost, and you will never be able to reincarnate." Emperor Li's roar sounded from the gate of hungry ghosts. The Dark Queen lowered her head silently. Little and strode forward. The white bone prison hovered above the gate of hungry ghosts. Emperor Li said, "Do you want to save her? If you come to the hungry ghost realm, I'll release her." The Dark Queen waved her hand anxiously. Little and stopped, turned around, and took off. Suddenly, a golden meteor streaked across the sky and attacked her. She was in a daze, unable to dodge in time. The golden light struck her on the back, and with the sound of bones cracking, she fell out of the sky like a bird that had been struck by an arrow. The golden comet flew backwards and landed in the hands of an old monk. It was a wooden fish mallet. The old monk wore a pilot's hat and an embroidered kasaya. His long eyebrows were snow white like frost, but his face was tender like an infant's. There were layers of light behind his head, and he shone with golden light. He descended from above slowly, with boundless dignity. The dauntless monk exclaimed, "The imperial advisor of the left." As it turned out, the old monk was the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, the abbot of the Lingua Temple, the imperial advisor of the left of the Great Xia Empire. His authority was supreme, and his strength was supreme too. No one expected him to have been hiding in the shadows the entire time, only launching a sudden sneak attack at this moment. The unraging monk flew into a rage. He took a step forward and questioned, "Aren't you afraid of sullying the name of the imperial advisor of the left with such lowly actions?" The imperial advisor of the left's white eyebrows twitched. "To kill the enemy for the sake of the Buddha, why would I care about a mere reputation?" Unraging, So be it if you're shielding a demon, but you're actually shielding the enemy of Buddha now. You've truly fallen too deeply into the demonic path. I'll punish you to the Lingua Temple and reflect on your mistakes. His voice was flat, but it left no room for doubt, much less change it. All the children of Buddha in the world had to listen to his orders. The dauntless monk said, "My junior brother has spoken rudely, offending the imperial advisor. Please forgive him. The enemy of Buddha is absolutely irreconcilable with our Buddhist sects, but the hungry ghost realm is even more of a great problem. How can we attend to one and lose sight of the other? The Lingua Temple has its own plans regarding the matter of the hungry ghost realm. What this imperial advisor says may not be a golden rule, but there are very few that don't count." The imperial advisor of the left tossed the wooden fish. It swelled in the wind, and the crack widened, swallowing the unraging monk. "If you resist, your punishment will be doubled. Despicable wretch!" The unraging monk turned into a demon of war and sent the wooden fish flying with a punch. Little and landed in the lush vegetation. The fragrance of flowers rippled through the air, drifting through the night wind. She heard the banyan tree king's voice. "Mother, wait for me." Little and said silently. With a wave of her hand, her long hair drifted into the air, and a handful of black balls scattered into the surroundings. The zombie dragon king stared at a black ball that flew towards him and suddenly felt intense fear. He wanted to pull back and retreat. Boom! More than 30 small black balls exploded at the same time, turning into balls of red light that were condensed with terrifying power. Then they rapidly expanded, each of them shooting out tens of thousands of rays of red light. The rays of light interweaved together, turning into a gigantic red light ball that swallowed everything with her as the center. The ground shook violently, kicking up a wave of earth several hundred meters tall, reaching several hundred kilometers away. The waves of air were like several dozen storms stacked on top of each other, dancing wildly in the surroundings. The monk kings halted in the air far away, unable to stabilize themselves. Booms rang out in their ears, leaving them dumbfounded by the terrifying destructive power. As for the ghouls, they bore the brunt of the attack. Their tight encirclement instead became a fatal blow. They were blasted to pieces one by one, their souls dispersed. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, but it felt like a very long time had passed. A mushroom cloud slowly rose into the sky, and a huge pit that spanned 100 kilometers appeared where it had been. Bang! The zombie dragon king's cracked head fell to the ground. Its soul flame had already been extinguished. Several dozen corpse kings and ghost kings died on the spot, while the remaining ones were all injured. Like startled birds, they flew around the pit, afraid to approach it. It's the landmine balls of the school of Moism. The imperial advisor of the left frowned heavily. He recognized the origins of the black balls with a single glance. Only great grandmasters of Moism could refine these balls of lightning. They were extremely difficult to refine and difficult to control, so they could not be used in battle. They could only be used to attack cities and formations. However, every single one of them possessed the might of a mountain that could annihilate mountains. They pursued the ultimate destructive power. He wondered how she had managed to collect so many of them. However, the dauntless monk vaguely recalled that when Li Qingshan killed the master of the Sword Collection Palace, he had obtained many of these balls of lightning. Originally, the Sword Collection Palace had planned on using them to bombard the Demon Suppression Hall, but he never thought they would be used here in the end. They had basically died together. She sighed and sighed. After all, the Chan Monastery of Devanaga was indebted to her and Li Qingshan. If she were not the enemy of Buddha, perhaps she would have inherited the position of abbot already. The imperial advisor of the left said, "These balls of lightning don't differentiate between friend and foe. The enemy of Buddha is at the center, so he must be heavily injured. We have to use this opportunity to kill the enemy of Buddha, or he'll definitely become a great problem in the future." "Yes," the monk king answered. The dauntless monk said, "Imperial advisor, this is a heaven-sent opportunity. Why don't you send some people to seal up the gate of hungry ghosts and rid the world of a great problem?" The imperial advisor of the left hesitated slightly. The hungry ghost realm was indeed a great problem. Roar! A hysterical roar rang out from the gate of hungry ghosts. Emperor Li was clearly utterly furious. Not only had he failed after all his planning and preparations, but he even suffered heavy losses instead. Deathly aura surged out from the gate of hungry ghosts. The tear expanded, like a great mouth roaring at the sky. The wasteland of death expanded rapidly until it approached the boundary of the Mist Province. The clear sky was shrouded by dark clouds again, and they became even thicker. In the vast sea of trees, the Banyan Tree King watched this happen. He knew this was not just Emperor Li's power. The size of the Gate of Hungry Ghosts was the result of the final balance between the two worlds. Even if the ghost tower constantly rose, it would only expand the wasteland of death. This was the expansion of the hungry ghost realm. It was eager to devour this world and devour her. The destruction of the world seemed to be unavoidable. The imperial advisor of the left said, "Ignore these ghouls for now. We have to find her." With the power of a god, the Banyan Tree King slowly sent his consciousness underground, but he gave up again. "Little, and I don't want to become enemies with you. That goes against my agreement with Qing Shan, but I can't become friends with you either, as I know what you're going to do." Under the scouring of the deathly aura, the Dark Queen's body rapidly withered. She was dying. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.